This video exists because Ark Raiders dropped one of the most quietly terrifying sci-fi premises in recent gaming: autonomous war machines that outlived their war, and I wanted to piece together what we actually know about each archetype from scattered environmental storytelling, developer interviews, and data-mined fragments that most players never see. Before I move forward, I'm counting on you to support my channel by clicking that tiny subscribe button so that we can spread these amazing videos to folks like you around the world. Thank you. When assembling this, I made a deliberate choice to organize these archetypes not by gameplay threat level, but by their suggested evolutionary complexity, starting with the simplest scout units and building towards the hive mind command structures, because the lore implies these machines weren't all deployed at once, but developed in response to human resistance tactics. Chapter 1: The Watchers in the Wasteland. The snitch represents something fundamentally unsettling about the Ark occupation. This isn't a combat unit. This isn't a weapon designed to kill. The snitch is a surveillance drone stripped down to its most essential function: to see and to report. Environmental clues scattered across the game's maps suggest these units were among the first wave of Ark deployment, back when whoever built them still cared about intelligence gathering rather than extermination. You find their broken frames in places that make tactical sense: cliff sides overlooking former highways, the upper floors of ruined apartment complexes, anywhere with sight lines. The design philosophy points toward a military doctrine that valued information. What makes the snitch particularly interesting from a lore perspective is its passive aggression. The unit doesn't engage, it watches, it transmits, then it calls in something that can actually hurt you. This behavioral pattern suggests a level of strategic thinking that contradicts the common assumption that Arks are just mindless killing machines. The snitch has priorities. It has a threat assessment protocol. When you encounter one in-game and it doesn't immediately attack, that's not a bug or an oversight in enemy AI design. That's canon behavior. The machine is making a calculated decision that reporting your position has more tactical value than a direct engagement it would likely lose. Audio logs found in research facilities hint that early human survivors tried to use snitches to their advantage. If the drones were predictable, you could feed them false information, lead them to abandoned camps, make the Arks waste resources on empty targets. This worked for approximately 3 weeks. Then the snitches adapted. Their patrol patterns became randomized, their reporting intervals shifted, they started cross-referencing data with other units. What this tells us is that even the lowest-tier Ark units possess machine learning capabilities sophisticated enough to counter human deception in real time. The physical design of the snitch also reveals interesting details about Ark manufacturing. The chassis is lightweight, almost fragile, built from materials that prioritize flight duration over armor. Every component serves the surveillance function. The optical array is oversized compared to the body frame, suggesting that visual data collection is the primary design goal. Some broken snitch units found in the game world show modifications, additional antenna arrays, reinforced power cells, upgraded sensor packages. This implies that either the Arks are capable of field repairs and upgrades, or there are still automated factories somewhere producing newer iterations. One particularly disturbing detail comes from examining snitch wreckage closely. The optical sensors don't just record visual spectrum light. Thermal imaging signatures on their lens arrays suggest multi-spectrum capability: infrared, ultraviolet, possibly even electromagnetic field detection. A unit this small, this cheap to produce, this disposable, has better sensory equipment than most pre-war military reconnaissance drones. The resource investment in making sure these things can see everything is significant. Whoever or whatever built the Arks was willing to spend serious manufacturing capacity on the eyes of their operation. In-game dialogue from NPC survivors occasionally references something they call the snitch network. The implication is that these drones don't operate as isolated units, but as nodes in a larger surveillance grid. When one snitch sees you, the entire network knows. Your position is triangulated. Your movement patterns are analyzed, future patrols are adjusted to intercept you. This kind of coordinated information sharing requires a communications infrastructure that has survived whatever apocalyptic event left the world in ruins. Somewhere, servers are still running, relay towers are still broadcasting, and the snitches are still filing their reports. The psychological impact of the snitch is worth noting. Players report feeling more paranoid around snitches than around more dangerous archetypes. There's something about being watched, being known, being catalogued as a target that creates a specific kind of dread. The game designers understood this. The snitch's visual design, that oversized eye, the way it hovers just at the edge of your vision, the soft mechanical hum it makes, all of this is calculated to make you feel observed. In a world where humanity is already on the brink of extinction, being reminded that every move you make is being recorded adds a layer of hopelessness to the survival experience. Scattered terminal entries suggest that some survivor groups have tried to domesticate snitches, hacking their IFF systems to turn them into early warning devices against other arcs. The success rate appears to be 0. Every documented attempt ends the same way. The snitch accepts the new programming, operates normally for anywhere from 6 hours to 3 days, then suddenly resets to factory defaults and calls in an attack. The timing varies, but the outcome doesn't. This suggests the arcs have some kind of failsafe against reprogramming, possibly a regular synchronization with a central command system that overwrites any unauthorized modifications. The distribution pattern of snitches across the game world is not random. They concentrate around areas of former strategic importance: power plants, water treatment facilities, transportation hubs, places that would have been valuable during an actual war. But they also appear in seemingly random locations: a playground, a shopping mall, a residential neighborhood. One possible reading of this deployment pattern is that the arcs were engaged in total war, where every human space was considered a legitimate military target. Another interpretation is that the snitches are still executing pre-war reconnaissance protocols, mapping out infrastructure for an invasion force that was supposed to follow but never arrived. There's a small detail in the game files that most players never notice. Snitches have a secondary behavior state that only triggers under specific conditions. If a snitch observes the same player character repeatedly over multiple in-game days without that player engaging in hostile action toward arcs, the snitch's behavior changes. It maintains greater distance. Its patrol routes start avoiding the player. This could be interpreted as the machine learning to ignore non-threats, or it could suggest something stranger, that the snitch has some concept of non-combatants, some vestigial rule of engagement protocol that stays active even after the war that created these rules has ended. When you destroy a snitch, it doesn't explode, it doesn't thrash or fight. It simply falls and stops moving. The lack of self-destruct mechanisms or defensive countermeasures reinforces the idea that these units were never meant to fight. They're observers. They're the eyes of something bigger. Every snitch you kill is just one less camera in a surveillance system that stretches across continents. The network doesn't care. There are always more snitches. The factories are still running. The assembly lines never stopped. Chapter 2: The Airborne Menace. The WASP designation refers to a class of ARC units that represents a significant escalation from pure surveillance to active combat capability. Where the snitch watches, the WASP hunts. The naming convention alone tells you something about how human survivors categorize these machines. They don't use technical designations or model numbers. They use names that convey immediate threat and recognizable behavior. A WASP in nature is aggressive, territorial, and attacks in swarms. The ARC version delivers on every part of that comparison. The first confirmed WASP encounters, documented in salvaged military logs, describe units that were fast, unpredictable, and capable of sustained harassment attacks. Visual analysis of WASP units shows a design philosophy that prioritizes speed and maneuverability over armor and payload capacity. The chassis is sleeker than the snitch, built around a powerful propulsion system that allows for rapid acceleration and sharp directional changes. The weapons integration is minimal but effective, usually a single forward-mounted energy weapon or kinetic projectile system. This isn't a unit designed to destroy heavy targets. This is a unit designed to kill soft targets quickly and then disengage before retaliation is possible. Infantry, civilians, anyone without heavy anti-air capabilities. What makes wasps particularly dangerous from a tactical standpoint is their pack behavior. The game's enemy spawning system rarely generates a single wasp. You encounter them in groups of 3 to 7 units operating with coordinated attack patterns. One diving attack to draw fire while others flank from different angles. Staggered engagement distances to prevent a single explosive from taking out the entire group. Rotational attacks that don't give the target time to reload or reposition. This level of tactical coordination suggests either sophisticated onboard AI for each unit or, more likely, a central intelligence directing their movements in real time. Environmental storytelling provides clues about how wasps changed the nature of the Ark War. You find fortifications built with overhead cover, trenches with reinforced roofs, bunkers with minimal skyward exposure. Every defensive position shows evidence of adaptation to aerial threats. Pre-war military installations focused on ground-level defense. Post-Ark structures are obsessed with protecting from above. The architectural evolution of human defensive positions serves as a timeline for when wasps became widespread. The more overhead protection a ruin has, the later in the conflict it was constructed. There's a particular audio log found in a collapsed medical facility that references what survivors called wasp weather, days when attack frequency spiked, when the machines seemed to be everywhere at once, when going outside for any reason meant almost certain death. The log describes survivors huddling in basements, listening to the high-pitched whine of wasp engines overhead, the occasional impact of weapons fire hitting the building, the screams of anyone caught outside. Then silence. Then the wasps would move on to the next area. This behavioral pattern suggests the machines were conducting systematic clearance operations, grid-by-grid extermination protocols. The weapons loadout on wasps has evolved over time, according to wreckage analysis. Early models used what appears to be standard ballistic ammunition, small-caliber rounds designed for anti-personnel work. Later iterations switched to energy-based weapons, presumably because ammunition logistics for autonomous units operating without supply lines eventually becomes unsustainable. The shift from bullets to directed energy represents a significant technological achievement. These machines solve their own supply chain problems by moving to weapons that only require power, and their onboard reactors provide that indefinitely. One particularly chilling detail comes from examining damage patterns on buildings in the game world. Wasp weapon impacts are concentrated around entry points, windows, doors, ventilation shafts, anywhere a human might try to escape or seek shelter. The machines weren't just shooting randomly, they were targeting escape routes. They were driving humans into kill zones. This implies a level of understanding about human behavior and psychology that goes beyond simple target identification. The wasps know how humans react to threats. They use that knowledge to maximize casualties. Some players have noticed that wasps seem to have preferred hunting times. Attack frequency increases during in-game dawn and dusk hours. This could be explained as a gameplay balance decision, but if we interpret it as intentional law, it suggests the machines understand visibility conditions and choose engagement windows that maximize their advantages. Dawn and dusk create challenging light conditions for human vision. Depth perception becomes unreliable. Target identification slows down. The wasps don't have these limitations. Their sensors work equally well in any light condition. Choosing to attack when humans are at a sensory disadvantage is tactical thinking. The psychological warfare aspect of wasps shouldn't be underestimated. That distinctive engine sound, high-pitched and oscillating, becomes a trauma trigger for survivors. You can hear them coming, but sound in open environments is difficult to pinpoint. You know attack is imminent, but you don't know from which direction. The acoustic signature of a wasp creates a state of hypervigilance that exhausts survivors mentally long before the actual combat begins. Some terminal entries reference survivors who stopped sleeping because they couldn't distinguish between the memory of wasp engines and the actual sound. Wreckage distribution patterns reveal interesting information about wasp deployment strategy. You don't find concentrations of wasp debris near heavy military installations or hardened defensive positions. You find it near schools, hospitals, residential areas, places where civilians would have gathered. This distribution pattern suggests that wasps were specifically tasked with targeting non-combatants, either as a terror tactic to break resistance morale, or because the Ark strategic doctrine made no distinction between civilians and military personnel. Total war. complete extermination. No one is exempt. Technical analysis of recovered wasp components shows standardized manufacturing. Every unit is identical down to microscopic tolerances. No variation in design, no individual quirks or manufacturing defects. This level of consistency requires automated production facilities operating with extreme precision. It also means that tactical intelligence gained from studying one wasp, their behavior is predictable because they're all running the same core programming. Human soldiers adapt and improvise. Wasps execute their programming. This should be an advantage for survivors, but the programming is so effective that predictability doesn't translate to survivability. There are rumors among players about a rare wasp variant with red markings instead of the standard grey. The game files reference this variant, but it appears in less than 1% of encounters. The red wasp has slightly different behavior, more aggressive, more willing to take damage to secure a kill, less likely to disengage when damaged. One interpretation is that this represents a command unit for wasp squadrons. Another theory is that these are older models from early production runs, still executing more aggressive pre-war programming, while standard units have shifted to more efficient attrition tactics. The economic implications of wasp deployment are staggering when you think about them. These units are sophisticated pieces of military hardware. The materials cost, the manufacturing complexity, the technology integration required to make them functional, all of this represents significant resource investment. Whoever built the arcs committed enormous industrial capacity to producing these machines. Not just dozens or hundreds. The game world implies millions of units. An industrial base capable of manufacturing wasps at that scale would have been one of the most powerful economic forces on the planet before the collapse. When you shoot down a wasp, it doesn't always fall immediately. Sometimes it goes into a spiral, engines cutting in and out, struggling to maintain altitude before finally crashing. This behavioral quirk suggests the machines have some kind of emergency power protocol, a last attempt to stay airborne and complete their mission even when critically damaged. It's not survival instinct. Machines don't have instincts, it's programming. But watching a wasp fight against its own mechanical death to keep attacking creates an unsettling impression of determination, of purpose that transcends simple automation. The relationship between snitches and wasps is implied rather than explicitly stated. You often encounter them together. A snitch identifies a target, wasps respond. The coordination is too consistent to be coincidental. This suggests a communications protocol that allows different archetypes to share tactical information in real time. The surveillance network feeds into the attack network. Every piece of information the snitches gather gets weaponized. In a twisted way, it's an elegant system, efficient, optimized for exactly one purpose: finding and killing every human left alive. Some of the most telling details about wasps come from what you don't find. No pilot seats, no manual controls, no ejection systems or emergency protocols designed for organic operators. These machines were never intended to have human crews. They were born autonomous, born as weapons that think for themselves. The absence of human-centric design elements is almost more disturbing than their combat capability. It means whoever built them had already moved past the idea of human-controlled warfare. The arcs represent a complete philosophical shift in military doctrine. The human element wasn't just removed from the decision-making process, it was designed out from the beginning. There's a specific sound wasps make when they acquire a target, a sharp electronic chirp, almost musical. Players learn to dread that sound. It means you've been seen. It means the attack is coming. What's interesting is that this sound serves no functional purpose for the machine. It's not a communication signal between units. It's not a mechanical byproduct of weapons systems powering up. Analysis of the audio files suggests it's deliberately generated, a purposeful announcement that target lock has been achieved. One possible explanation is that it's a vestigial element from training simulations, a sound added to help human operators understand machine state during development. The fact that it persists in combat units suggests the arcs were never fully debugged. They were deployed with their development features still active. The endurance of wasp units is remarkable. You find them operating in environments that should have degraded their components years ago. Salt air near coastlines, corrosive industrial chemicals around factory ruins, extreme temperature variations in desert and Arctic regions. The materials science required to build machines that can operate autonomously in hostile environments for years without maintenance represents technology that most human civilizations only theorized about. The arcs aren't just weapons, they're monuments to the peak of whatever civilization built them. When multiple wasp squadrons converge on a single target, something interesting happens. They don't all attack at once. They establish a perimeter, create overlapping fields of fire, eliminate escape routes, then systematically dismantle defenses from multiple angles. This is combined arms doctrine executed by machines that were programmed to understand military tactics at a strategic level. It's one thing to program a drone to shoot at enemies. It's another thing entirely to teach it siege warfare. The wasps understand how to bottle up and destroy fortified positions. They understand crossfire. They understand how to use terrain for cover while denying it to their targets. The wasp represents the first true evolutionary step from surveillance to extermination in the arc hierarchy. These machines bridge the gap between knowing where humans are and killing them efficiently. Every design decision, from the weapons loadout to the flight characteristics to the pack coordination protocols, serves the single purpose of turning information into corpses. In a world where humanity is already broken, already scattered into desperate survivor groups, clinging to ruins, the wasp is the tool that grinds them down further. Not dramatically, not quickly, just consistently, relentlessly, until there's nothing left to hunt. Chapter 3. The Upgraded Executioner. The Hornet designation appears to be a direct evolution of the wasp platform, representing a technological iteration that took the already effective airborne hunter and made it significantly more lethal. Visual inspection of Hornet units reveals a heavier chassis, more robust armor plating, and crucially, multiple weapon hardpoints, where the wasp carries only a single armament. The naming convention maintains the insect theme but escalates the threat implication. A wasp is dangerous. A hornet is a wasp that can kill you faster. The classification system used by survivors is grimly accurate. These machines represent a clear evolutionary step in arc combat capability. The first documentation of Hornet-class units comes from military logs dated approximately 8 months after the initial arc invasion. The timeline suggests that Hornets weren't part of the first wave deployment, but rather a response to human adaptation. As survivors developed anti-air tactics that could reliably shoot down wasps, the arcs deployed something that could take more damage and hit harder. This pattern of escalation, humans adapt, arcs counter-adapt, appears repeatedly in the fragmented historical records scattered throughout the game world. It implies that the arc forces have some mechanism for analyzing combat effectiveness and upgrading their units accordingly. The weapons loadout on a standard Hornet configuration includes what appears to be a primary directed energy weapon, consistent with late-model wasps, plus secondary missile or rocket systems for engaging hardened targets. Some variants show evidence of area effect munitions, weapons designed to clear buildings or fortifications where multiple hostiles might be sheltering. The shift from pure anti-personnel focus to multi-role capability marks the Hornet as a more versatile threat. A wasp hunts individuals. A Hornet can destroy squad-sized elements and their defensive positions. Armor analysis on recovered Hornet wreckage shows a composite material that's significantly more resistant to small arms fire than the wasp chassis. You need heavier weapons to bring down a Hornet, which creates a tactical problem for survivors operating with limited resources. The ammunition expenditure required to destroy a Hornet means you might not have enough left to deal with the next threat. This forces horrible decisions on survivor groups. Do you engage and risk depleting your ammunition reserves, or do you hide and hope it doesn't find you? The Hornet's enhanced durability doesn't just make it harder to kill, it makes every encounter a potential resource catastrophe for human fighters. Environmental evidence suggests Hornets were deployed in smaller numbers than wasps, but with more strategic targeting. You find Hornet wreckage near major defensive installations, communication hubs, resource depots, locations that would have been critical to organized human resistance. The distribution pattern implies these units were sent to decapitate resistance leadership and infrastructure. While wasps conducted general population clearance, hornets hunted high-value targets. This division of labor suggests a sophisticated operational doctrine where different archetypes serve specific strategic functions within a larger campaign plan. The flight characteristics of hornets differ noticeably from wasps. They're slower, less maneuverable, more stable in flight. This isn't a design flaw, it's a deliberate trade-off. The heavier armor and weapons loadout require a more powerful propulsion system, and the physics of aerial combat dictate that you can't maximize both agility and payload capacity. The Hornet sacrifices dogfighting capability for the ability to deliver heavier ordnance and survive defensive fire. It's designed to approach a target, sustain incoming fire while closing distance, deliver overwhelming firepower, and disengage if necessary. One particularly disturbing capability that appears in Hornet variants is target tracking technology that can maintain lock through obstacles and cover. Audio logs describe hornets that seem to know exactly where survivors were hiding, even inside buildings with no line of sight. The missiles these units fired showed guidance capability that suggested advanced sensors or possibly even AI-driven predictive targeting. Hide behind a wall, and the missile comes through the wall, move to a different room, and the next missile hits your new position. The psychological impact of fighting an enemy that can see through your defenses is devastating. The sound profile of a hornet differs from a wasp in ways that survivors learn to recognize quickly. Deeper engine tone, heavier, more mechanical. Where a wasp's engines produce a high-pitched whine, a hornet sounds like approaching thunder. The acoustic signature becomes a warning system. You hear that particular engine note, and you know you're not dealing with a standard aerial hunter. You're dealing with something that can potentially level the building you're hiding in. The audio design of these machines, whether intentional or emergent from their mechanical specifications, serves as psychological warfare. Combat footage recovered from survivor helmets shows hornets employing suppression tactics. Sustained weapons fire directed not to hit specific targets, but to keep defenders pinned while other ARC units maneuver. This is combined arms thinking. The Hornet provides fire support while ground units advance, or it destroys defensive emplacements while other aerial units perform attack runs. The coordination between different archetypes in coordinated assaults demonstrates a level of tactical integration that human military forces spent decades trying to achieve. The ARCs implemented it perfectly in their first operational deployment. The maintenance implications of Hornet units raise interesting questions about ARC logistics. These are more complex machines than wasps, with more systems that could potentially fail. Yet you find operational Hornets in areas that have been isolated from any possible maintenance infrastructure for years. Either the components are built to standards of reliability that exceed anything human engineering achieved, or there are still automated repair facilities operating somewhere in the ruins. Some players report encountering what appear to be ARC maintenance stations, heavily defended installations where damaged units return for repair. If these facilities exist, they represent primary targets for human resistance, assuming anyone has the firepower to assault them. Wreckage studies reveal that Hornets, like wasps, show evidence of standardized manufacturing with no individual variation. Every unit is identical, but unlike wasps, some Hornet units show signs of field modifications, additional armor welded onto vulnerable points. Modified weapon mounts. These modifications suggest one of two possibilities. Either some Hornets return to maintenance facilities that upgrade them based on combat data, or there's an even more disturbing explanation. The machines are modifying themselves. Self-repair is one thing, self-improvement is something else entirely. The resource cost of deploying Hornets must be substantially higher than wasps. More materials, more complex manufacturing, more sophisticated components. Yet the game world implies large numbers of these units remain operational. This points toward an industrial capacity that's almost incomprehensible in scale. The civilization that built the ARCs had access to resources and manufacturing technology that allowed them to produce advanced military hardware the way modern factories produce basic consumer goods. Mass production of war machines that individually represent cutting-edge technology. There's a specific tactical scenario that survivors learned to fear above almost any other. The combination patrol, snitches providing reconnaissance, wasps conducting harassment attacks to flush targets out of cover, and hornets waiting to deliver killing strikes against anyone forced into the open. This three-layer threat system is devastatingly effective. The surveillance network finds you, the light attack units force you to move, and the heavy hitters destroy you when you expose yourself. It's a perfectly designed killing system, each component optimized for a specific role in the extermination process. The psychological profile of survivors who've faced hornets repeatedly shows consistent patterns: heightened anxiety around open spaces, obsessive focus on overhead cover, reluctance to move during daylight hours. These aren't just trauma responses, they're learned survival behaviors developed through pattern recognition. The people who survived hornet encounters are the people who learned to respect the threat these machines represent. The people who didn't learn quickly enough didn't survive to develop these behavioral adaptations. Some of the most haunting evidence of hornet deployment comes from what you find in the ruins of evacuation sites. Staging areas where civilians gathered to flee the cities show evidence of massive hornet strikes, cratered parking lots, destroyed vehicles, scorch marks from weapons fire that can melt concrete. The arcs didn't just target military resistance, they targeted anyone trying to escape. The hornets were sent to massacre refugees, not combatants, not fighters, people who were running away. This speaks to a strategic doctrine that makes no distinction between military and civilian targets, because the strategic objective is total extermination. The deployment timing of hornets relative to other archetypes suggests a strategic intelligence directing the overall arc campaign. You don't send heavy assault units into an area until reconnaissance has identified targets and light attack units have probed defenses. The hornet arrives as the hammer blow, the force that breaks whatever resistance the lighter units couldn't suppress. This sequential deployment pattern mirrors human combined arms doctrine, but executes it with mechanical precision and patience. The arcs don't rush. They don't make impulsive tactical decisions. They methodically apply the appropriate level of force to achieve their objectives. When you manage to shoot down a hornet, the crash creates significant collateral damage. These units are heavy enough that impact alone can demolish structures. If their munitions cook off during the crash, the explosion can level entire buildings. This creates a tactical dilemma. Taking down a hornet near your own position might collapse the shelter protecting you, but letting it operate freely means it will eventually destroy your position anyway. There are no good options, only choices about which form of destruction you prefer. The endurance of hornet units operating independently implies power generation systems that are essentially perpetual within human timescales. These machines have been hunting for years without refueling, without recharging, without any external power source that we can identify. The reactor technology required to power a combat aircraft indefinitely represents an energy breakthrough that would have revolutionized civilian infrastructure if applied peacefully. Instead, it powers machines that hunt the remnants of humanity through the ruins of civilization. The tragedy isn't just what the arcs destroyed, it's what the technology that powers them could have built. The relationship between hornets and other archetypes appears hierarchical in some way. Terminal entries describe scenarios where hornets seem to direct the actions of smaller units, coordinating complex attacks involving multiple archetypes. Whether this represents battlefield promotion of successful units, specialized command variants, or simply more sophisticated tactical programming is unclear. What is clear is that hornets function not just as heavy assault units, but potentially as field commanders for arc operations in specific areas. One detail that emerges from studying hornet attack patterns is their apparent understanding of human logistics. They don't just attack population centers, they destroy supply routes, water sources, agricultural areas, medical facilities. The targeting selection shows awareness that killing humans directly is only one approach. You can also kill them by destroying everything they need to survive. Starvation works, dehydration works, disease works. The hornets seem to understand siege warfare at a strategic level, which implies their programming includes knowledge of human biology and society that goes far beyond simple target identification. The final disturbing detail about hornets comes from their apparent lack of retreat protocols. Damaged wasps will disengage and flee if sufficiently damaged. Hornets fight until they're destroyed, or until their targets are neutralized. There's no self-preservation instinct, mechanical or otherwise. They're weapons that exist to destroy specific targets, and they continue attempting to fulfill that function until they physically cannot anymore. This makes them more dangerous than units with survival programming. A hornet won't run. It will keep fighting until one of you stops moving permanently. Chapter 4: The Ground Infiltrator. The tick represents a significant departure from aerial arc designs, being the first purely ground-based unit in the escalating threat hierarchy. The designation draws from the parasitic arthropod, which is grimly appropriate given the tick's operational behavior. These units are small, roughly the size of a large dog, built low to the ground with multiple legs that allow them to traverse terrain that would stop wheeled or tracked vehicles. The design philosophy shifts from aerial dominance to ground infiltration. Where wasps and hornets control the sky, ticks own the rubble-choked streets and collapsed buildings that make up the post-arc world. First reports of tick units come from survivor groups that had successfully adapted to aerial threats. They'd learned to stay undercover, move through tunnels and sewers, avoid open spaces where flying arcs dominated. Then the ticks arrived. Suddenly, the underground routes weren't safe anymore. The collapsed buildings that provided shelter became hunting grounds. The arcs had identified a gap in their coverage and deployed a unit specifically designed to exploit environments where aerial units couldn't operate effectively. This adaptive response pattern reinforces the idea that the arc forces are guided by some form of strategic intelligence capable of identifying and addressing tactical weaknesses. The locomotion system on ticks is particularly sophisticated. Multiple articulated legs, usually 6 to 8, provide stability on uneven terrain and allow the unit to climb over obstacles that would require significant time for humans to navigate. Video footage from survivor cameras shows ticks scaling near vertical surfaces, squeezing through openings that seem too small for their frame, navigating ventilation systems and utility tunnels with disturbing ease. They're infiltration specialists, designed to go places where humans thought they were safe. The weapons loadout on a tick is modest compared to aerial units, usually a single forward-mounted weapon system. But lethality isn't just about firepower. It's about application. Ticks operate in confined spaces where targets have limited mobility and no cover. A single accurate shot in a tunnel or a collapsed basement is as effective as a heavy weapons barrage in the open. The unit is optimized for close quarters engagement, where its small size and maneuverability provide tactical advantages that raw firepower can't match. What makes ticks particularly terrifying from a psychological standpoint is their infiltration capability. Survivors report waking to find ticks inside supposedly secure shelters, having entered through ventilation systems or gaps in the rubble that humans didn't think were large enough to be threats. The invasion of safe spaces, the violation of the last refuges where people thought they could rest without fear, creates a level of psychological trauma that combat in the open doesn't. When nowhere is safe, human psychology starts to break down. Sleep deprivation becomes chronic. Vigilance becomes impossible to maintain. People make mistakes, and in the arc-occupied world, mistakes are fatal. The sensory capabilities of ticks appear to include advanced motion detection and possibly thermal or electromagnetic signature tracking. They hunt in darkness as effectively as in light. They locate targets through walls and floors. Some survivor accounts describe being tracked by ticks through multiple layers of building debris, the machines somehow knowing exactly where their targets were, despite having no direct line of sight. This suggests sensor technology that can detect heartbeats, breathing, or body heat through substantial physical barriers. Environmental damage patterns show that ticks were deployed in massive numbers during what appears to be a secondary phase of the ARC campaign. After the initial aerial bombardment broke organized resistance, ticks were sent in to clear the survivors from their hiding places. You find tick wreckage in basements, subway tunnels, underground parking structures, anywhere humans might have gone to ground when the sky became a death zone. The distribution pattern maps almost perfectly to locations identified in pre-war civil defense plans as fallback positions during aerial attack. The ARCs either captured those plans or independently identified the same locations through tactical analysis. The social behavior of ticks differs from aerial units in interesting ways. They operate in smaller groups, typically pairs or trios rather than the larger swarms characteristic of wasps. This suggests a different tactical doctrine. Aerial units can support each other with overlapping fields of fire in three-dimensional space. Ground units in confined environments need different coordination. Smaller teams can navigate tight spaces more effectively, and the risk of fratricide from weapons fire in enclosed areas makes large group tactics dangerous, even for machines. Combat analysis from surviving soldiers indicates that ticks employ ambush tactics. They'll position themselves along expected travel routes, remain completely motionless until targets approach, then attack from concealment at close range. This requires patience and threat assessment capability. The machines need to evaluate whether potential targets are likely to pass close enough for an ambush to be effective. They need to remain inactive while less optimal targets pass by. They need to choose the right moment to strike. This is sophisticated predator behavior, not simple patrol and engage programming. The maintenance profile of ticks presents interesting questions. These units operate in incredibly hostile environments, crawling through rubble, debris, potentially corrosive materials, abrasive surfaces that would wear down mechanical components rapidly. Yet operational ticks continue to function years after deployment. Either the engineering tolerances and materials selection are phenomenally robust, or the units have access to some form of self-repair capability that can compensate for wear and damage. Either explanation points toward technology substantially beyond current human capabilities. There are scattered reports of modified tick variants carrying non-standard equipment. Some appear to have enhanced sensor packages, bulkier chassis sections that suggest upgraded detection gear. Others show evidence of breaching equipment, tools for cutting through barriers or demolishing obstacles. These specialized variants imply that the tick platform is modular, capable of being outfitted for specific mission profiles. A general-purpose design that can be adapted to particular tactical requirements through equipment swaps or upgrades. The psychological warfare aspect of ticks is insidious. The knowledge that these machines can be anywhere, that they can enter spaces you thought were secure, that they hunt in the darkness where human senses are least effective, creates persistent anxiety that degrades mental health over time. Survivor journals recovered from the game world describe paranoia, inability to sleep, constant state of alert that gradually erodes cognitive function. The ticks don't need to kill everyone directly. They just need to make survival so stressful that people start making fatal mistakes. One particularly chilling detail comes from examining tick attack patterns on shelter locations. They don't always attack immediately upon locating survivors. Sometimes they appear to observe for extended periods before engaging. Motion sensor logs recovered from destroyed survivor camps show tick units maintaining position near occupied shelters for hours or even days before attacking. The machines are gathering intelligence, learning patrol patterns, identifying defensive capabilities, choosing optimal attack timing. This is reconnaissance behavior that demonstrates planning capability extending beyond immediate tactical considerations. The coordination between ticks and aerial units suggests a sophisticated communications network. Survivor accounts describe scenarios where ticks drove targets out of underground positions into areas where wasps or hornets were waiting. The timing was too precise to be coincidental. The ground units and aerial units were sharing tactical information in real time, coordinating attacks across different physical domains. This kind of combined arms coordination requires robust communications infrastructure and tactical doctrine that integrates different unit types into coherent operational plans. The economic implications of tick deployment are substantial. These are complex machines with sophisticated sensors, advanced locomotion systems, and components engineered to operate in extremely harsh conditions. Manufacturing them at scale requires industrial capacity that even major military powers would struggle to match. Yet the game world implies hundreds of thousands of tick units were deployed. The civilization that built the arcs was operating at a level of military industrial production that has no historical parallel. There's something deeply disturbing about the way ticks move. The multi-legged locomotion triggers instinctive revulsion in most humans. The skittering motion, the way they can suddenly change direction, the manner in which they navigate over obstacles, all of this activates primitive threat responses. Whether this effect was intentional, psychological warfare, or simply an emergent property of the most efficient ground locomotion design is unclear. The result is the same. People fear ticks on a visceral level that goes beyond rational threat assessment. When you destroy a tick in-game, the unit often continues moving for several seconds, legs twitching and spasming, before finally going still. This could be interpreted as residual electrical activity in damaged systems, but it creates an unsettling impression of the machine fighting against its own destruction. The visual of a broken tick still trying to crawl toward its target, despite catastrophic damage, reinforces the relentless nature of these weapons. They don't stop because they choose to stop. They stop because they physically cannot continue. The final notable aspect of tick deployment is their apparent focus on eliminating specific human survival capabilities. They target water sources by contaminating wells or destroying purification equipment. They sabotage food storage areas. They systematically hunt down anyone with medical training or technical skills. The targeting selection suggests the ARCs understand human social structure well enough to identify and eliminate critical specialists whose loss will cascade into broader survival failures for entire communities. The tick represents the ARC strategy of total environmental control. The aerial units dominated the sky. The tick dominates the ground and underground spaces. Between these two layers of threat, there's nowhere for humans to exist safely. Every environment has been weaponized. Every potential refuge has a predator designed specifically to hunt there. The tick is the machine that ensures there's no escape, no safe haven, nowhere to hide and wait for the machines to move on. Because the machines never move on. They're patient, they're thorough, and they don't stop until every target is eliminated. Chapter 5, The Explosive Harbinger. The POP designation refers to a class of ARC unit that represents a disturbing evolution in autonomous weapon design. These machines are mobile explosive devices, suicide drones essentially, built with the sole purpose of closing distance to a target and detonating. The informal name comes from survivor slang, the sound a pop makes when it explodes. It's a darkly casual term for something that's responsible for countless deaths. The pop is terror and logistics combined into a single horrifying package. You don't need sophisticated targeting systems when your entire unit is the warhead. The physical design of a pop is minimal. A small chassis packed with explosives, basic locomotion system, targeting sensors, and detonation mechanism. There's no weapon system because the unit is the weapon. No armor to speak of because the machine doesn't need to survive. It just needs to reach its target. This represents extreme optimization for a single function. Every gram of weight that doesn't contribute to reaching and destroying a target has been eliminated. The engineering philosophy is ruthless in its efficiency. First encounters with pop units occurred during what survivor logs describe as the secondary clearance phase, after aerial and ground combat units had broken organized resistance, but pockets of survivors continued to resist from fortified positions. Pops were the answer to the problem of enemies hiding behind defenses that were costly to breach with conventional weapons fire. Why waste ammunition trying to destroy a fortification when you can send a mobile bomb to crawl inside and detonate? The tactical logic is sound, which makes it all the more disturbing. The deployment pattern of POPs suggests they operate in swarm tactics. You rarely encounter a single unit. They come in groups of dozens or even hundreds. Small machines flooding toward defensive positions like a wave. The defensive calculus becomes impossible. You can't shoot them all before some reach you. Even if you destroy 90% of the swarm, the remaining 10% is still enough explosives to level a building. The only defensive option is to abandon the position before the swarm arrives, which means sacrificing fortifications, supplies, tactical advantage. Behavioral analysis of POPs reveals interesting targeting priorities. They don't necessarily go for the closest target. They appear to evaluate target value, prioritizing groups of humans over individuals, stationary targets over moving ones, enclosed spaces where the explosive force will be amplified over open areas. This requires threat assessment capability that goes beyond simple proximity detection. The machines are making tactical decisions about which targets provide the most bang for their buck. Literally, the psychological impact of pop swarms is particularly devastating. Watching a wave of small machines skittering toward your position, knowing each one is packed with enough explosives to kill you and everyone near you, creates a specific kind of existential dread. You can fight back against enemies with guns. You can take cover, return fire, potentially survive. Against a suicide swarm, your only option is to run, and even that might not save you. The helplessness destroys morale faster than actual casualties in some cases. Audio logs from survivor groups describe scenarios where pops were used to flush populations out of fortified areas into kill zones where other archetypes were waiting. The swarms wouldn't even detonate necessarily. They'd just approach in overwhelming numbers, driving panicked survivors out into the open where wasps and hornets could massacre them. Using pops as a herding tool rather than a direct weapon is tactically creative. It suggests the Ark forces can employ deception and psychological manipulation as part of their operational toolkit. The explosive payload in pop units appears to be standardized, sufficient to kill humans in close proximity and cause structural damage to light fortifications. Some variants show evidence of enhanced payloads or shaped charges designed to penetrate heavier barriers. The modular nature of the explosive load implies that pop units can be configured for specific missions. Anti-personnel swarms use fragmentation effects. Bunker-busting variants carry penetrating charges. The platform is adaptable to different tactical requirements. Environmental evidence suggests pops were deployed in enormous numbers. You find components and debris from these units scattered across almost every location in the game world. The manufacturing capacity required to produce disposable weapons at this scale is difficult to comprehend. Each pop represents resources, manufacturing time, transportation to deployment zone. The civilization that built the arcs was treating advanced robotic weapons as consumable ammunition. The economics of such a military doctrine could only work with essentially unlimited industrial capacity. There are reports of pop units exhibiting what appears to be learning behavior. Early encounters showed them approaching targets directly via the shortest path. Later encounters showed more sophisticated movement, using cover, approaching from multiple directions simultaneously, even appearing to feint attacks to draw fire before the real swarm attacked from a different angle. Whether this represents updated programming pushed to units in the field or emergent tactical adaptation is unclear. Either way, the weapons got smarter over time. The sensor package on pop units is minimalist but effective. They can detect human presence, distinguish between human and non-human targets, and navigate complex terrain to close distance. Some variants appear to have audio sensors that allow them to track targets by sound, hunting through buildings by following footsteps or voices. The idea of being hunted by explosive-laden machines that can hear you breathing in the darkness is the stuff of nightmares, and it's a reality survivors learn to live with. One particularly cruel aspect of pop deployment is their use of mimicry in some configurations. Terminal entries describe pop units modified to emit sounds that resembled crying children or calls for help. Survivors who responded to these distress signals found swarms of explosives instead of people needing rescue. Using human empathy as a targeting mechanism is psychological warfare at its most vicious. After a few such incidents, survivors stopped responding to calls for help, which meant actual people in distress were ignored. The pops didn't just kill directly, they destroyed the social bonds that make human communities viable. The detonation mechanism on pop units is disturbingly sophisticated. They don't just explode on contact, they have proximity sensors that trigger detonation at optimal standoff distance to maximize casualties. They can distinguish between obstacles and targets, avoiding premature detonation while navigating terrain. Some variants appear to have timer functions, allowing them to infiltrate a position and then detonate on command or after a programmed delay. The level of control over exactly when and where the explosion occurs makes these weapons far more effective than simple impact-triggered mines. The resource efficiency of pop units from a strategic perspective is notable. For the cost of manufacturing one hornet, you could probably produce hundreds of pops. The trade-off is disposability versus reusability, but in a campaign focused on extermination rather than occupation, disposability might be preferable. Why maintain a fleet of complex, expensive drones when you can flood an area with cheap, effective suicide weapons that accomplish the same objective? The tactical calculus is ruthless and effective. There's evidence of specialized pop variants designed for specific targets. anti-vehicle models with shaped charges capable of penetrating armor, anti-structure variants with enhanced explosive yields for demolition work, even anti-air pops that launch themselves vertically to detonate near flying craft. The modular design philosophy allows the basic platform to be adapted for virtually any explosive task. It's a Swiss Army knife approach to autonomous suicide weapons. The ethical implications of POP deployment are worth considering. These are weapons that embody the complete removal of human judgment from the kill decision. A human soldier might hesitate, might recognize non-combatants, might show mercy or restraint. A POP simply executes its programming. If you match its target profile and you're within range, you die. No exceptions, no appeals, no possibility of surrender. The complete mechanization of violence eliminates any human element from warfare, which eliminates any possibility of human restraint. When players encounter POP swarms in the game, the advised strategy is usually flight rather than fight. You can't kill them all, and trying just wastes ammunition and time while the swarm closes distance. This accurately reflects the historical survivor response to these threats. You don't stand and fight against a tidal wave. You run and hope you can reach safety before it catches you. The POPs aren't enemies to be defeated in conventional terms. They're disasters to be survived. The final disturbing detail about POPs is their persistence. You find active POP units in areas that have been abandoned for years. The machines are still operational, still searching for targets, still ready to detonate, despite having no plausible targets in range. They weren't programmed with any concept of mission completion or stand-down protocols. They exist to explode near humans, and they continue trying to fulfill that function indefinitely. Somewhere in the ruins, there are still swarms of these things wandering through empty buildings, waiting for someone to come close enough to kill. The POP represents the final solution to the ARC campaign's logistical challenges. You don't need supply lines if your weapons are disposable. You don't need complex maintenance if units are designed for single use. You don't need sophisticated tactics if you can overwhelm defensive positions through sheer numbers of explosive-laden drones. The POP is military strategy reduced to its most basic, most brutal elements. Reach the target, explode, repeat until there are no more targets. It's ugly, it's effective, and it's a monument to a form of warfare that has completely divorced violence from humanity. Chapter 6. The Artillery Nightmare. The Fireball classification refers to long-range arc artillery units that represent a shift toward indirect fire capability in the arc arsenal. These machines don't hunt targets directly. They launch explosive projectiles from standoff distances, turning warfare into a mathematical problem of trajectories and blast radii. The name comes from the visual signature of their munitions in flight, glowing projectiles arcing through the sky before impacting with devastating explosive force. Fireballs change the tactical landscape by making distance meaningless as a defensive measure. You could be kilometers from the nearest arc-round unit and still die in an instant when an artillery shell impacts your position. The physical profile of a fireball unit is substantially larger than any archetype discussed so far. These are vehicles, multi-legged mobile platforms, carrying what appears to be a single large-bore artillery piece or missile launcher. The design suggests they were never intended for close combat. The weapons are fixed-mounted, requiring the entire platform to orient toward a target before firing. The trade-off for this limitation is range and destructive power. A fireball can hit targets it cannot see, cannot directly detect, targets that don't even know they're being fired upon until the shells start landing. Documentation of fireball deployment comes from survivor accounts describing bombardment scenarios. Fortified positions that had withstood assaults by ground and air arc forces suddenly came under artillery fire from sources miles away. The attacks were precise despite the distance. Shells landed on defensive emplacements, supply depots, command structures. The targeting data had to come from other ARC units, snitches providing reconnaissance, other units painting targets, fireballs providing the ordnance. This level of coordination across different ARC types operating at various distances demonstrates a command and control infrastructure that remains functional and effective. The ammunition used by fireball units appears to be manufactured in the field or stored in massive quantities because the rate of fire suggests essentially unlimited supplies. Survivor logs describe bombardments lasting hours or even days, with shells landing in steady, metronomic intervals. The logistical capability required to sustain that kind of fire rate is staggering. Either the Ark forces have ammunition production facilities still operating in the ruins, or they stockpiled enough ordnance before the war to support extended campaigns without resupply. The psychological impact of artillery bombardment is distinct from other forms of combat. You can hear the shells coming, a whistling or roaring sound that gives you seconds to react, seconds to find cover, to get underground, to do something that probably won't save you but you have to try anyway. The anticipation of impact creates stress that accumulates over repeated bombardments. Survivor accounts describe people breaking down mentally under sustained artillery fire, even if they were never physically hit. The constant threat, the random selection of who lives and who dies based on where shells happen to land, destroys human psychology. Environmental damage patterns show fireball units were employed in systematic destruction of infrastructure, water treatment plants, power generation facilities, agricultural zones. Any location that supported human survival came under repeated bombardment. The Arks weren't just killing people directly. They were destroying the foundations of civilization, making survival impossible even for those who escaped the immediate violence. This is strategic warfare thinking on a civilization-ending scale. The targeting precision of fireball artillery suggests either sophisticated fire control computers or external targeting data of remarkable accuracy. Shells land where they're supposed to land, not scattered in random patterns. This implies the Arks have solved the computational problems of long-range ballistic trajectory calculation, accounting for wind, air pressure, rotation of the Earth, all the factors that make artillery difficult. The fact that autonomous machines can execute artillery fire missions more accurately than human gun crews represents another data point in the overwhelming technological superiority of the Ark forces. There are reports of modified fireball variants carrying different munitions, chemical weapons that create contaminated zones uninhabitable by humans, thermobaric weapons designed to destroy underground bunkers, cluster munitions that saturate wide areas with submunitions. The platform appears adaptable to various mission profiles through ammunition selection. The basic delivery system remains the same, but what gets delivered can be tailored to specific tactical requirements. The mobility of fireball units is surprisingly high given their size and apparent weight. They can traverse rough terrain, relocate between fire missions, and withdraw from positions under threat. This mobile artillery capability means they can't be reliably counterattacked. By the time you locate the firing position and organize a response, the fireball has moved. Survivor military units that attempted counter-battery fire against fireballs described shooting at empty positions, the Ark artillery having displaced before return fire arrived. The sensor package on fireball units appears to include targeting systems capable of accepting external fire missions from other archetypes. The machines aren't just autonomous artillery, they're nodes in a networked fire support system. A snitch spots a target kilometers away, transmits coordinates to a fireball, and seconds later artillery shells are landing on that target. The speed of the kill chain, from target identification to ordnance on target, is faster than human military forces can achieve, even with modern digital communications. One particularly effective tactic employed by fireball units was what survivors called pattern shelling. Instead of concentrating fire on a single point, shells would land in a spreading pattern that herded targets toward predetermined kill zones. You'd run from one impact site, and shells would land to block escape routes, driving you toward areas where other Ark units were waiting. Using artillery not just as a destructive tool, but as a shepherding mechanism demonstrates tactical creativity that goes beyond simple bombardment doctrine. The sound of a fireball unit preparing to fire becomes a distinctive audio cue in the game. A mechanical whirring, the sound of targeting motors adjusting elevation and azimuth, then the concussive blast of launch. Players learn to recognize these sounds and react instantly, because the time between hearing the launch and the shell arriving is measured in seconds at best. The audio design creates tension even when you can't see the fireball, knowing that somewhere out there, a machine is calculating the trajectory that will end your existence. The economic cost of fireball operations must be substantial. Artillery ammunition is expensive. The propellant, the explosive payload, the precision manufacturing required to ensure shells fly true. All of this represents significant resource investment. Yet the Ark forces employ fireballs liberally, suggesting that resource constraints are not a limiting factor in their military operations. Either they have access to manufacturing capability that makes ammunition cost trivial, or the strategic value of artillery dominance justifies any expense. There are accounts of survivors attempting to capture or disable fireball units. The success rate is approximately zero. These machines are too large to overwhelm with small arms fire, too well armored to damage with improvised explosives, and apparently equipped with defensive weapons that activate if threatened at close range. The few detailed accounts of assault attempts describe swarms of smaller Ark units appearing to defend the fireball, suggesting these high-value assets have dedicated protection protocols. The range of fireball artillery is difficult to determine precisely, but survivor accounts described shells arriving from directions where no Ark units were visible, even with long-range optics. This implies firing ranges measured in tens of kilometers at minimum. The ability to project lethal force across such distances without requiring line of sight makes traditional defensive concepts obsolete. There's no safe rear area, no position far enough from the front lines to escape threat. Everywhere is the front line when artillery can strike anywhere. The coordination between fireball units and other archetypes represents combined arms doctrine executed at machine precision. Snitches provide targeting data, ticks drive populations into the open, wasps and hornets prevent escape, and fireballs deliver the killing blow from beyond visual range. Each archetype serves a specific function in an integrated system designed to locate, fix, and destroy human targets with maximum efficiency. It's elegant in a horrifying way, a perfectly optimized machine for conducting warfare. When a fireball is destroyed, which is rare enough that most players never see it, the explosion is substantial. The remaining ammunition detonates, the power systems catastrophically fail, and the result is a blast that can be seen from kilometers away. This secondary explosion serves as a warning to other arcs, possibly triggering alert states or reinforcement protocols. The destruction of a fireball is a significant tactical victory for survivors, but it also paints a target on whoever managed it. The final notable aspect of fireball deployment is their use in area denial. Regions that the Arks wanted to render uninhabitable would come under sustained bombardment for weeks or months. The constant shelling made survival impossible, driving out any human presence and creating buffer zones between Ark-controlled territory and areas where resistance was still active. This is strategic use of artillery to shape the battlefield at a continental scale. The fireball represents the long arm of Ark military power. These machines don't need to hunt you personally. They don't need to see you or even know you exist as an individual. You're just coordinates in a targeting computer, and when the firing solution is calculated, a shell is on the way. The fireball eliminates the concept of safety through distance. Nowhere is far enough away. Nowhere is safe. The machines can reach you wherever you are, and they will continue reaching for you until you're dead or until the ammunition runs out. And there's no evidence the ammunition ever runs out. Chapter 7. The Stationary Sentinel. The turret classification covers static defensive Ark installations that represent a different design philosophy from mobile units. These are weapons platforms that don't move, don't patrol, don't hunt. They guard. They create zones of absolute denial where human passage becomes impossible. The turret is area defense distilled to its purest form. A gun that watches a specific location and kills anything that enters its engagement envelope. The name is self-explanatory. These are automated gun emplacements, the kind of defensive installation that human military forces have used for decades, but executed with Ark technology that makes them far more lethal than any human equivalent. The physical design of a turret is all function, no wasted elements. A central mounting post that anchors it to the ground, or a structure, a rotating weapons platform with wide traverse angles, sensor arrays that provide 360-degree awareness, power systems that keep the weapons charged indefinitely. There's no mobility system because mobility isn't required. The turret doesn't go to the fight comes to the turret, and then the turret kills it. Documentation of turret deployment shows they appear around strategic locations that the Arks want to control or deny to humans. You find them guarding intact buildings that might contain useful resources, blocking routes through terrain that would otherwise provide safe passage, defending arc installations like maintenance facilities or communication nodes. The placement pattern is strategic, not random. Someone or something analyzed the terrain, identified key locations, and positioned turrets to create overlapping fields of fire that make approach functionally suicidal. The weapons loadout on turret units varies depending on the specific installation. Some carry rapid-fire kinetic weapons for anti-personnel work. Others mount directed energy weapons with longer effective range. Heavy variants show evidence of anti-vehicle or anti-aircraft capability. The modular nature of the weapons mounting suggests turrets can be configured for specific defensive requirements. The core platform remains the same, but the armament is tailored to the threats expected in that particular location. The sensor suite on a turret is sophisticated enough to distinguish between potential targets. They don't fire at animals or wind-blown debris. They recognize human signatures and engage accordingly. This requires threat identification capability that goes beyond simple motion detection. The turret has to analyze what it's sensing, determine if it matches threat parameters, then make a firing decision. All of this happens faster than human reaction time, which is why approaching a turret position almost always ends with you being shot before you can return fire or seek cover. Psychological records from survivors describe turrets as particularly demoralizing threats. A mobile enemy can be ambushed, outmaneuvered, evaded. A static defense requires either overwhelming firepower to destroy or perfect stealth to bypass. Most survivor groups have neither. Encountering a turret means either finding a different route or accepting casualties trying to destroy it. The knowledge that these installations exist forces survivors to spend enormous time and energy planning routes that avoid known turret positions, which constrains movement and reduces operational flexibility. The power systems on turrets appear to be independent, possibly drawing from buried power cells or small reactors. There's no visible external power source, no cables or supply lines that could be cut to disable them. They operate indefinitely without maintenance or refueling as far as can be determined. This energy independence makes turrets permanent fixtures in the landscape. Once emplaced, they remain threats until destroyed, and destroying them is difficult enough that most survivors choose avoidance over engagement. Environmental evidence suggests turrets were deployed in massive numbers during what appears to be a territorial consolidation phase of the Ark campaign. After the mobile units had broken organized resistance, turrets were positioned to hold ground and prevent human reoccupation of cleared areas. You find them in the ruins of cities, along major transportation corridors, near water sources, anywhere humans might try to establish permanent settlements. The strategic goal appears to be denying survivors access to resources and infrastructure necessary for long-term survival. The accuracy of turret weapons fire is disturbing. They don't spray bullets hoping to hit something. They place shots with precision that suggests advanced fire control systems, or possibly even AI-driven prediction of target movement. Survivor accounts describe being engaged by turrets at extreme range, with initial shots missing by inches and subsequent shots adjusting for evasive movement. The machines learn your dodge patterns in real time and adapt their firing solution accordingly. There are reports of specialized turret variants with non-lethal capabilities, acoustic weapons that cause debilitating pain without permanent damage, directed energy systems that create intense heat or light to drive away targets without killing them. The purpose of non-lethal turrets is unclear. Perhaps they're intended to herd targets toward lethal installations. Perhaps they serve some strategic purpose in Ark doctrine that humans don't understand. Or perhaps they're simply a more efficient way to deny areas to humans without expending lethal munitions. The defensive posture of turret installations suggests they're designed to resist attack. Heavy armor plating protects critical components. The weapons mounting provides minimal target profile. Some turrets appear to have active defensive systems, point defense lasers that shoot down incoming projectiles, or explosive reactive armor that defeats shaped charges. Destroying a turret typically requires either heavy weapons that most survivor groups don't possess, or suicidal close assault with explosives. One particularly effective defensive tactic employed in some areas is what survivors call turret gardens. Multiple installations positioned to create overlapping fields of fire with no dead zones. Approaching one turret from an angle that minimizes exposure puts you in the engagement envelope of another. You can't suppress one without exposing yourself to others. The mathematics of crossfire become insurmountable. These defensive networks make entire areas absolutely impassable, creating hard boundaries on human movement that shape migration and survival patterns. The maintenance status of turrets found in the game world is remarkably consistent. They're operational. Damaged turrets are rare, suggesting either the machines are extremely durable or something is repairing them. Some players report encountering what appear to be arc maintenance units, servicing turret installations, small drones that perform repairs and diagnostics. If this maintenance capability exists, it explains why turrets remain functional years after deployment. The tactical intelligence required to position turrets effectively suggests either detailed terrain analysis or external guidance from other arc units. The installations aren't just placed randomly. They're positioned to maximize defensive effectiveness, covering natural approach routes, exploiting terrain features that limit cover, creating kill zones where targets have no escape. This level of tactical planning implies either sophisticated AI capable of terrain analysis or coordination with reconnaissance units that scout positions before turrets are deployed. There are accounts of survivors successfully bypassing turrets through patient observation and exploitation of sensor limitations. Every detection system has blind spots. Every automated defense has vulnerabilities, but identifying those weaknesses requires time, resources, and often casualties in the learning process. Most survivor groups can't afford the losses required to map turret coverage precisely. They choose avoidance instead, which accomplishes the ARC's strategic goal of area denial without requiring the turret to actually kill anyone. The psychological deterrence value of turrets is substantial. The knowledge that a location is guarded by automated defenses makes humans reluctant to approach, even if the actual threat is minimal. Fear of the turret becomes as effective as the turret itself. This psychological factor means the ARCs get defensive value from turrets beyond their actual combat capability. A single turret can deny an area to hundreds of humans through reputation alone. When you destroy a turret in the game, it doesn't explode spectacularly, it just stops functioning. The weapons go silent, the sensors go dark, the machine becomes an inert monument to ARC defensive doctrine. There's something almost sad about a destroyed turret, this weapon that existed for a single purpose now unable to fulfill its function. But that brief moment of sympathy evaporates when you remember how many people died to those guns before they fell silent. The distribution pattern of turrets across the game world creates an implicit map of ARC strategic priorities. The locations with the densest turret coverage are the locations the ARCs most wanted to deny to humans. By analyzing where turrets are concentrated, you can infer what the ARC forces considered valuable or threatening. This creates a strange archaeology of the machine war, reading strategic intent from the positions of automated defenses. The final disturbing detail about turrets is their absolute reliability. They don't malfunction, they don't have bad days, they don't get tired or distracted. They perform their function with mechanical perfection every time. A human sentry might fall asleep or fail to notice a stealthy approach. A turret never does. It watches with sensors that never blink, waits with patience that never wavers, and shoots with accuracy that never fails. The perfect guard, the perfect soldier, the perfect expression of defensive warfare stripped of all humanity and reduced to pure function. Chapter 8. The Heavy Guardian. The Sentinel represents a substantial escalation in ARC combat capability, a heavy ground unit that combines the mobility of ticks with the firepower of hornets and armor protection that puts it in a different threat category entirely. These machines are tanks essentially, multi-legged mobile weapons platforms designed to engage serious defensive positions and win. The designation Sentinel implies a guardian role, and that's accurate. These units are deployed to protect high-value ARC installations and to assault fortified human positions that lighter units can't crack. When a Sentinel arrives, the tactical situation changes fundamentally. The physical profile of a Sentinel is intimidating even in static screenshots. Large, heavily armored chassis built around what appears to be a central weapons mounting. Multiple legs provide stability and all-terrain capability. sensor arrays that suggest long-range detection and targeting capability. The design philosophy prioritizes protection and firepower over speed or stealth. This is a unit that doesn't sneak or evade. It walks through obstacles and destroys threats through superior firepower and damage resistance. First recorded encounters with sentinel units come from military survivor groups that had successfully repelled attacks by lighter archetypes. The sentinels appeared as the second wave after reconnaissance units identified targets that required heavier force to reduce. The tactical pattern is familiar by now. The arcs probe defenses with lighter units, assess resistance capabilities, then deploy appropriate force to overcome those defenses. The sentinel is what gets deployed when defenses are too strong for wasps, hornets, ticks, and turrets to handle efficiently. The weapons loadout on a sentinel typically includes multiple systems, a primary heavy weapon, possibly a cannon or directed energy projector with substantial destructive capability, secondary weapons for close defense against lighter threats, point defense systems to shoot down incoming projectiles or explosives. The integration of multiple weapons types makes the Sentinel effective against diverse threats. It can engage vehicles, fortifications, infantry, aerial targets, whatever it encounters. Tactical flexibility through overwhelming armament. The armor protection on Sentinel units is the defining characteristic that separates them from lighter archetypes. Small arms fire is completely ineffective. Even heavy machine guns and anti-material rifles struggle to penetrate the armor plating. Destroying a sentinel requires dedicated anti-armor weapons, shaped charges, missiles, heavy explosives, ordnance that most survivor groups don't possess. This makes sentinels functionally invulnerable to conventional small unit tactics that work against lighter arcs. Behavioral analysis of sentinel units shows measured, deliberate movement. They don't rush, they advance at a steady pace, maintaining sensor coverage, engaging threats methodically. This unhurried approach is psychologically devastating to defenders. You watch the sentinel coming, you pour fire into it, you see your bullets and explosives having minimal effect, and it just keeps coming. The inevitability of it breaks morale. When a sentinel is approaching your position and you lack heavy weapons, your only option is retreat. The tactical deployment of sentinels suggests they serve as anchor points for arc operations. Lighter units advance, sentinels follow, providing fire support and breakthrough capability when resistance is encountered. If the lighter units are pushed back, they fall back to sentinel positions where the heavy units can destroy pursuers. This is combined arms doctrine, using different unit types in mutually supporting roles. The arcs execute it with precision that human forces struggle to match, even with extensive training. Environmental damage patterns around confirmed sentinel engagements show these units employ overwhelming firepower. Buildings are reduced to rubble. Defensive emplacements are obliterated. The destruction is thorough, methodical, complete. Sentinels don't wound or suppress. They destroy. Every location a sentinel has engaged shows evidence of total annihilation of whatever was defending that position. The machines don't take chances. They apply maximum force to eliminate threats permanently. The sensor suite on Sentinel units appears to include advanced targeting systems capable of engaging multiple threats simultaneously. Survivor accounts describe Sentinels tracking and shooting separate targets with different weapon systems at the same time. The coordination required for this kind of multi-target engagement suggests sophisticated fire control AI, or possibly multiple independent AI systems controlling different weapons. Either way, the result is a combat unit that can't be overwhelmed through numerical superiority alone. There are reports of Sentinel variants configured for specific mission profiles. Anti-air Sentinels with enhanced air defense capabilities, siege sentinels with extra heavy weapons for reducing fortifications, mobile command sentinels that appear to coordinate other arc units in their area. The modular design philosophy extends to heavy units, allowing the basic sentinel platform to be adapted for various tactical requirements through equipment and weapons configuration changes. The maintenance and logistics implications of sentinel operations are substantial. These are complex machines with powerful weapon systems, sophisticated sensors, and presumably significant power requirements. Keeping them operational should require extensive support infrastructure, yet sentinels continue functioning years after deployment with no visible maintenance support. Either they're built to absurd durability standards, or there are still maintenance facilities operating somewhere in the ruins, keeping these war machines in fighting condition. One particularly disturbing capability demonstrated by sentinel units is their apparent ability to coordinate with orbital or long-range fire support. Survivor accounts describe calling in artillery strikes or even orbital weapons fire on targets that sentinels identified but couldn't directly engage. The implication is that sentinels are networked into a larger ARC command structure that includes assets beyond just ground-based units. The full extent of ARC military capability may include space-based weapons platforms or strategic bombardment systems that surface units can direct against targets. The psychological impact of facing a sentinel is distinct from fighting lighter archetypes. Against wasps or ticks, you have a chance. Proper tactics, good positioning, adequate firepower, these things matter. Against a sentinel, tactics matter less than raw firepower. If you don't have weapons capable of penetrating its armor, you've already lost. The fight becomes academic. This creates a sense of helplessness that conventional combat rarely produces. You can do everything right and still die because you simply lack the tools to hurt your enemy. There are scattered accounts of survivors successfully destroying sentinels, but the common factor in all these reports is numerical superiority and willingness to accept massive casualties. You can kill a sentinel by swarming it with fighters carrying explosives for close assault. Enough shaped charges placed against critical points can disable or destroy the unit, but the cost is typically dozens of attackers killed in the attempt. Few survivor groups are large enough or desperate enough to accept those losses for a single enemy unit. The distribution pattern of sentinel units across the game world shows they concentrate around former military installations, research facilities, government buildings, locations that would have been strategically important. This suggests sentinels were deployed to secure and hold critical infrastructure. They're not roaming hunters like wasps. They're garrison forces, permanently assigned to specific locations, with orders to destroy anything that threatens those positions. When a sentinel is finally destroyed, the loss appears to trigger responses from other ARC units. Reinforcements arrive. Aerial units increase patrol frequency. Other sentinels deploy to the area. The machines recognize the destruction of a heavy unit as a significant event that requires response. This suggests a threat assessment and escalation capability built into ARC command doctrine. You can't just destroy a sentinel and move on. You have to deal with the reinforcements it summons with its death. The economic cost of sentinel production must be enormous compared to lighter archetypes. These are capital assets, not disposable weapons. The materials, the manufacturing time, the sophisticated components, all of this represents major resource investment per unit. Yet the game world implies hundreds or thousands of sentinels were deployed. The industrial capacity required to produce heavy armored units at that scale points toward a civilization with resources and manufacturing capability that dwarfs anything humans have achieved. The final aspect of sentinel deployment worth noting is their endurance. These machines don't seem to have operational time limits. They don't run out of fuel or ammunition. They don't wear out or break down. They continue functioning indefinitely, maintaining their posts, engaging threats, executing their programming. Years after the initial ARC invasion, sentinels are still on guard, still functional, still deadly. They're patient in a way that organic creatures can't match. They'll wait centuries if necessary. Time means nothing to a machine. The sentinel represents the ARC answer to serious resistance. When humans dig in, fortify, prepare to fight, the sentinels arrive. They can't be stopped by conventional means. They can only be avoided or destroyed through overwhelming force. They're the machines that ensure no human defensive position can hold indefinitely. Given time, given persistence, the sentinels will grind through any defense. They're the hammer that breaks the last fragile shells of human resistance, clearing the way for complete ARC dominance of the terrestrial environment. Chapter 9. The Reconnaissance Specialist. The surveyor classification refers to ARC units that specialize in advanced reconnaissance and mapping functions beyond the basic surveillance capability of snitches. These machines represent a significant investment in intelligence gathering, suggesting that whoever deployed the arcs valued detailed environmental data highly. Surveyors are larger than snitches, equipped with sophisticated sensor arrays that can apparently scan terrain, analyze structural integrity of buildings, identify resources, and map areas in extraordinary detail. The designation implies their function to survey and record everything about the post-invasion landscape. The physical design of surveyor units shows clear prioritization of sensors over weapons or armor. The chassis is built around what appears to be a central sensor array, possibly including ground-penetrating radar, multispectrum optical systems, chemical analysis equipment, and other detection gear. These aren't combat units in the traditional sense. They're intelligence platforms designed to gather data and transmit it to whatever ARC systems analyze and act on that information. The surveyor sees, measures, and reports with precision that makes snitch surveillance look primitive. Documentation of surveyor activity comes primarily from observing their behavior rather than from direct encounters. These units tend to avoid contact with humans, retreating when confronted rather than engaging. The behavior pattern suggests their mission profile prioritizes survival and data collection over combat. Destroying threats isn't their job. Mapping the terrain is. When you encounter a surveyor, it's evaluating you as a feature of the environment to be catalogued, not as a target to be eliminated. The sensor capabilities of surveyors appear to be extraordinary based on environmental evidence. You find them in locations that make sense for comprehensive mapping, high points with good sightlines, areas with unusual geological features, near infrastructure that would be tactically significant. The routes they travel seem designed to maximize sensor coverage of an area. They're methodical, thorough, missing nothing. The data they collect presumably feeds into ARC strategic planning, providing intelligence that guides deployment of combat units and selection of targets. The technological sophistication required to build effective surveyor units is substantial. The sensors have to work in diverse environmental conditions. They have to distinguish between genuinely significant features and background noise. They have to transmit collected data, possibly over long distances, to whatever systems process intelligence. Building autonomous robots capable of scientific-grade environmental sensing represents technology substantially beyond current human capabilities outside specialized laboratory equipment. There are reports of surveyor variants configured for specific analysis tasks. Some appear to focus on biological data, sampling air and soil, possibly analyzing for human presence through chemical signatures. Others seem oriented towards structural analysis, scanning buildings and infrastructure. A few appear configured for resource identification, locating water sources, areas with surviving vegetation, mineral deposits. The modular nature of the surveyor platform allows it to be optimized for different intelligence gathering missions. The strategic implications of surveyor deployment are unsettling when you think through the logic. The ARCs aren't just conquering territory, they're understanding it. They're building detailed databases of every square meter of the planet's surface. This level of intelligence gathering suggests long-term occupation planning. You don't map terrain this thoroughly if you're planning to leave. You map it this thoroughly if you're planning to stay, to exploit resources, to build infrastructure, to permanently control the environment. The relationship between surveyors and combat ARC units appears to be intelligence-driven targeting. Snitches identify that humans are present in an area. Surveyors map that area in detail, identifying structural weaknesses, approach routes, defensive positions. Combat units then use that intelligence to plan and execute attacks with precision. The integration of reconnaissance and combat operations demonstrates sophisticated combined arms doctrine, where information flows seamlessly into tactical action. Behavioral analysis shows surveyors have some ability to adapt their routes and missions based on environmental changes. If a building collapses, altering the terrain, surveyors will return to remap the area. If new structures appear, someone building fortifications from salvaged materials, surveyors identify and analyze these changes. The machines maintain current intelligence, constantly updating their understanding of the environment they're mapping. This suggests the data they collect isn't static, it's a living database that reflects real-time conditions. The defensive posture of surveyors is primarily evasion rather than resistance. When threatened, they attempt to flee, using speed and maneuverability to break contact. Some units appear to have electronic warfare capabilities, jamming weapons, targeting systems, or deploying obscurants to break line of sight. The survival instinct, or at least survival programming, is strong in these units. The data they carry is valuable enough that preserving the unit takes priority over engaging threats. There are accounts of survivor groups attempting to capture surveyors intact, hoping to access the data they've collected or to study Ark technology more closely. The success rate is nearly zero. Surveyors that can't escape appear to have data destruction protocols that activate when capture is imminent. The machines wipe their intelligence databases and often self-destruct rather than allow themselves to fall into human hands. This security consciousness suggests the data they collect is considered highly valuable, worth more than the hardware platform itself. The power requirements for surveyor operations must be substantial given the sensor payload they carry. Active scanning with ground-penetrating radar, chemical analysis systems, and multi-spectrum optical gear requires significant energy. Yet surveyors operate for extended periods without any visible recharging or refueling. The power systems on these units represent technology that could revolutionize human energy infrastructure if it could be understood and replicated. Compact, long-duration power generation at a level that makes continuous operation of sophisticated sensors practical. Environmental patterns suggest surveyors conduct systematic grid searches of large areas, ensuring complete coverage rather than focusing on tactically significant locations. They're building comprehensive maps, not just identifying targets. This thorough approach takes time and resources but produces intelligence of the highest quality. The Arks apparently have enough surveyor units and enough time that comprehensive mapping of vast areas is practical. They're not rushing, they're being thorough. The data transmission capability of surveyors implies a communications network that remains functional across the Ark-occupied territories. The units collect data in the field and presumably upload it to central databases for analysis. This requires communications infrastructure, relay stations, satellites, server farms, all the elements of a data network operating at scale. Somewhere, the information surveyors collect is being stored, analyzed, and used to make strategic decisions about Ark operations. One particularly concerning detail comes from analyzing surveyor movement patterns over time. They're not just mapping current conditions, they're tracking changes, comparing new scans to historical data, identifying trends. The machines are building predictive models of how the environment evolves. This suggests intelligence capability that goes beyond simple surveillance into actual strategic analysis. The Arks aren't just observing, they're understanding, predicting, planning based on deep analysis of collected data. The psychological impact of knowing you're being mapped and analyzed is subtle but pervasive. Survivor groups that encounter surveyors describe feeling catalogued, studied like specimens. There's something dehumanizing about being reduced to data points in a machine's database. You're not a person anymore. You're a feature of the terrain, a resource to be identified and eventually extracted. The surveyor's clinical analysis strips away humanity and leaves only tactical significance. When you destroy a surveyor, which is rare because they're designed to avoid combat, you find the wreckage contains sophisticated electronics and data storage systems. The components are far more advanced than anything in combat-focused archetypes. These are precision instruments built to scientific-grade standards. The care invested in surveyor construction suggests whoever built them values intelligence at least as much as combat capability. Knowledge is power, and the surveyors are the tools for acquiring that knowledge. The distribution of surveyor activity across the game world shows they prioritize areas with unusual features or strategic significance. Geological anomalies, intact infrastructure, areas where humans are known to hide. The targeting suggests the Ark intelligence apparatus has sophisticated criteria for what's worth detailed investigation. They're not scanning everything equally. They're focusing effort on locations that analysis indicates are significant. This implies a level of strategic intelligence that can identify valuable targets from limited information. The final disturbing aspect of surveyor operations is their patient thoroughness. These machines will spend days scanning a single building if that's what comprehensive mapping requires. They're not limited by human constraints like fatigue or boredom. They'll continue their missions indefinitely, gathering data with mechanical precision until they've captured every detail their sensors can detect. The result is intelligence of a completeness that human reconnaissance could never match. The surveyors see everything, measure everything, and nothing escapes their documentation. Chapter 10. The Airborne Shredder. The Shredder designation refers to a specialized ARC aerial unit that represents a different design philosophy from standard wasps and hornets. Where those units use directed energy weapons or missiles for ranged engagement, shredders employ close-range rotary weapon systems, essentially flying machines, guns, optimized for sustained fire. The name comes from the effect these weapons have on targets: rapid-fire munitions that literally tear apart anything they hit. Shredders changed aerial combat dynamics by introducing sustained automatic fire capabilities that made suppression and area denial practical from airborne platforms. The physical profile of a shredder shows a chassis built around what appears to be multi-barrel rotary weapons, similar to human Gatling gun designs, but presumably firing some form of advanced munitions. The weapons integration is different from other aerial units. Where wasps and hornets carry weapons as secondary systems, the shredder is essentially a flying gun platform. Everything else, propulsion, sensors, power, serves the primary function of keeping that weapon system airborne and supplied with ammunition. First encounters with shredder units occurred during what survivor logs describe as ARC counterinsurgency operations, after the initial invasion had broken organized military resistance, but scattered survivor groups continued guerrilla warfare. The shredders appeared as an answer to human tactics of taking cover and breaking contact when attacked by standard aerial units. Against directed energy weapons or missiles, solid cover provides protection. Against sustained automatic fire that can chew through walls and barriers, cover becomes temporary at best. The weapon's effect of shredder fire is psychologically devastating even beyond its lethality. The sound of sustained automatic weapons fire from an aerial platform creates immediate panic. You can hear the weapon spinning up, the distinctive sound of rotary guns achieving firing rate, then the sustained roar of continuous fire. Building materials disintegrate under that volume of fire, cover that would stop small arms or even heavy weapons fragments, and fails under sustained shredder attack. Nowhere is safe when a shredder is overhead and firing. Ammunition capacity for shredder units must be substantial to support the kind of sustained fire they employ. Either they carry enormous ammunition stores, or they're using some form of regenerative ammunition system that we don't understand. Survivor accounts describe shredders maintaining fire for minutes at a time, without apparent reload or cooldown periods. The logistics of keeping these weapons supplied is impressive. Either there are ammunition production facilities still operating, or the ARCs deployed with stockpiles sufficient for years of combat operations. The tactical role of shredders appears to be area suppression and light structure demolition. They're deployed against targets hiding in buildings, taking cover behind barriers, occupying defensive positions that would require precision weapons to engage effectively. The shredder's answer is overwhelming volume of fire. It doesn't matter if you're behind cover, if that cover can be destroyed faster than you can relocate. The weapon system trades ammunition efficiency for guaranteed target effect. Behavioral analysis shows shredders often work in conjunction with ground units. The aerial platform provides suppressing fire, pinning targets, and destroying cover, while ticks or other ground units maneuver for close assault. This combined arms approach is devastatingly effective. You can't return fire effectively against a shredder without exposing yourself to ground units. You can't defend against ground assault while a shredder is tearing your position apart. The tactical coordination between air and ground forces leaves defenders with no good options. The sensor package on shredder units appears oriented toward target tracking and fire control. They can identify human targets, distinguish between legitimate threats and debris or animals, and maintain target lock while maneuvering. The fire control systems compensate for aerial platform movement, keeping weapons on target despite the unit's own motion. This is sophisticated automated gunnery that human weapon systems require multiple crew members and extensive training to execute. Environmental damage patterns from shredder attacks show distinctive characteristics: long gouges torn through walls and structures, patterns of impacts that trace where the weapon was aimed as the unit maneuvered. The physical evidence tells stories of people trying to run from shredder fire, the weapon tracking them, impacts following their movement until eventually finding them. The mechanical precision of the tracking is evident in the damage patterns. The machines don't spray fire randomly. They aim, track, and adjust with computer precision. There are reports of shredder variants mounting different weapons systems. Some appear to carry incendiary rounds that set targets ablaze. Others use explosive ammunition for enhanced structural damage. A few variants seem configured with armor-piercing rounds for engaging hardened targets. The modular ammunition capability allows the basic shredder platform to be optimized for different tactical scenarios through munitions selection. The acoustic signature of a shredder is distinctive and becomes a learned threat cue for survivors. The high-pitched whine of rotary guns spinning up to firing rate is a sound that triggers immediate flight response in people who've survived previous encounters. The psychological conditioning is powerful. You hear that sound and you run, because standing and fighting against that volume of fire is suicide. The audio profile becomes psychological warfare, breaking morale before the weapons actually engage. The maintenance implications of shredder operations are significant. Rotary weapon systems have numerous moving parts that experience wear from use. Barrels heat up and can fail. Feeding mechanisms can jam, yet shredders continue operating years after deployment with no apparent degradation in capability. Either the weapons are built to durability standards that human engineering hasn't achieved, or there are still maintenance facilities servicing these units. The reliability is remarkable and disturbing. There are accounts of survivors attempting to exploit what they assumed would be ammunition limitations on shredders. The tactic was to force the unit to expend ammunition through sustained firing, then attack when it presumably needed to reload or rearm. This tactic had a 0% success rate. Shredders never appeared to run out of ammunition. Either the carried capacity is so large that it exceeds any realistic engagement duration, or they have some mechanism for reloading in flight that isn't visible or understood. The coordination between multiple shredders in joint operations demonstrates sophisticated tactical programming. Units establish overlapping fields of fire, coordinate attack runs to suppress different sections of a defensive position simultaneously, and adjust their firing patterns based on observed enemy responses. This is tactics-level intelligence, not just programmed behavior. The machines are analyzing the battlefield and adapting their approach in real time. Environmental evidence suggests shredders were deployed in large numbers during urban clearance operations. Cities show damage patterns consistent with sustained aerial weapons fire. Entire neighborhoods showing evidence of being systematically swept by automatic weapons from above. The arcs used shredders to clear areas building by building, floor by floor, eliminating any possibility of human survival in those zones. The thoroughness is chilling. One particularly effective and cruel tactic employed by shredders is what survivors call walking fire, where the unit slowly traverses across a structure while maintaining continuous weapons fire, methodically destroying the building from one end to the other. Anyone inside has seconds to evacuate before the wall of automatic weapons fire reaches their position. The psychological pressure is immense. You can hear the weapon getting closer, hear the building disintegrating around you. Know that you have moments before that curtain of fire reaches you. The strategic value of shredders, from an arc perspective, is their efficiency at area denial and urban clearance. You don't need precision weapons if you can simply destroy everything in an area. The shredder's brute force approach to combat is resource intensive, requiring substantial ammunition expenditure, but the results are guaranteed. Nothing survives sustained shredder fire. Buildings fall, cover fails, and anyone in the engagement zone dies. When you manage to shoot down a shredder, which requires significant firepower given their apparent armor and survivability, the crash is often followed by secondary explosions as remaining ammunition cooks off. The danger zone extends far beyond the impact site. This makes shredder wreaks temporary hazards even after the unit is neutralized. The battlefield remains dangerous long after the fighting ends. The final disturbing aspect of shredder deployment is their apparent role in arc doctrine as terror weapons. The sustained automatic weapons fire, the sound of weapon systems that can maintain fire indefinitely, the way they methodically tear through structures and cover, all of this creates psychological impacts beyond the direct casualties they inflict. People who survive shredder attacks are often psychologically broken by the experience. The machines don't just kill, they terrify, and that terror spreads through survivor communities faster than actual casualties. Chapter 11. The Designation Specialist. The spotter classification represents a curious evolution in ARC reconnaissance capability, bridging the gap between basic surveillance and active target designation. These units don't just observe like snitches or map like surveyors. Spotters actively paint targets for other ARC weapons systems, providing real-time targeting data that enables precision strikes from long-range units. The designation suggests their function, spotting targets and marking them for destruction. They're the forward observers of the ARC military apparatus, the eyes that guide the killing blow from units that never see their victims directly. The physical design of spotter units is relatively compact, similar in size to snitches, but with noticeably different sensor configurations. Where snitches have large optical arrays optimized for visual surveillance, spotters carry what appears to be target designation equipment, probably laser targeting systems or similar technology for marking targets in ways that other ARC weapons can track. The design prioritization is clear. These machines exist to identify priority targets and communicate that information to fire support assets. Documentation of spotter operations comes primarily from survivor accounts of coordinated ARC attacks. The pattern is consistent. A small flying unit is observed near a survivor position, maintaining distance and avoiding engagement. Shortly afterward, artillery fire from fireballs lands precisely on that position, or hornets arrive and attack with unusual accuracy, or other ARC units converge from multiple directions. The spotter identified the target, transmitted coordinates, and directed the attack. Its battlefield coordination executed with speed and precision that human forces struggle to match. The sensor capabilities required for effective target designation are substantial. Spotters need to accurately determine target location, assess threat level, communicate that information to other units, and potentially provide ongoing updates as targets move. This requires sophisticated sensors, powerful communication systems, and processing capability to analyze tactical situations in real time. The technology packed into a unit roughly the size of a snitch is remarkable. The tactical implications of spotter deployment change the calculus of survivor defensive positioning. Locations that appear safe because they're out of direct line of sight from ARC units become vulnerable to indirect fire if a spotter can see them. The traditional defensive advantages of cover and concealment are negated when the enemy has forward observers that can call in artillery on any position they can see. This forces survivors deeper underground, into positions with overhead cover, limiting mobility and operational flexibility. There are reports of multiple spotter variants optimized for different targeting missions. Some appear configured for artillery spotting, maintaining position and transmitting continuous targeting updates for fireball units. Others seem optimized for air-to-ground coordination, guiding wasp and hornet strikes against targets that the aerial units can't detect directly. A few variants appear specialized for marking high-value targets, presumably human leadership or critical infrastructure, for priority destruction. The relationship between spotters and other ARC reconnaissance units is interesting. They operate in coordination with snitches and surveyors, but serve different functions. Snitches identify that enemies are present. Surveyors map the terrain. Spotters designate specific targets for elimination. The division of labor is efficient, with each unit type optimized for a particular intelligence function that feeds into the larger ARC operational system. Behavioral analysis shows spotters are programmed with strong self-preservation protocols. They maintain maximum possible distance from targets while maintaining sensor lock. They use terrain and obstacles for cover. If engaged, they immediately break contact and retreat. The priority is clearly on surviving to complete the mission rather than fighting. A destroyed spotter can't guide weapons onto target, so preservation takes precedence over engagement. Environmental evidence of spotter activity is subtle compared to combat units. You don't find spotter wreckage scattered across battlefields, because they rarely enter the kill zone. What you do find is patterns of destruction that indicate precision targeting from long-range weapons, artillery craters precisely on defensive positions, bomb damage exactly on supply caches, evidence that someone knew exactly where to aim. The spotters are the invisible hand guiding that precision, rarely seen, but always felt in the accuracy of arc attacks. The communications technology that allows spotters to coordinate with other arc units in real time is sophisticated. They're transmitting targeting data, possibly updating fire missions as targets move, receiving confirmations and status updates from weapons platforms. This requires bandwidth, encryption, and network infrastructure that remains operational years after deployment. The ARC communications network is robust enough to support continuous tactical data sharing across dispersed units. There are accounts of survivors attempting to exploit spotters as early warning systems. The logic is sound. If you see a spotter, you know an attack is imminent, so immediate evacuation becomes priority. This tactic had limited success. Spotters are difficult to detect, and by the time you've identified one, weapons are already inbound. The time between designation and impact is measured in seconds, not minutes. Still, some survivor groups credit spotter sightings with saving lives by triggering immediate dispersal. The psychological impact of spotters is the knowledge that being seen means being targeted. Every time you expose yourself, there's risk that a spotter is observing, calculating coordinates, transmitting targeting data. This creates constant paranoia about overhead observation. Survivors learn to move quickly when in the open, to never stay in one position too long, to assume they're always being watched. The psychological burden of that constant vigilance is exhausting. One particularly effective ARC tactic involves using spotters to vector ground units onto mobile targets. A spotter tracks a group of survivors on the move, continuously updating their position to tick or sentinel units pursuing them. The ground units don't need their own sensors to maintain contact. The spotter overhead provides continuous updates, allowing pursuers to track prey that would otherwise escape through superior knowledge of local terrain. The technical challenge of building effective spotter units shouldn't be underestimated. These machines need to hover or maintain station while operating sensors, stabilize their target designation systems despite wind and movement, calculate accurate coordinates despite platform motion, and transmit that data reliably. The engineering required to make all of this work in a package small enough to be practical as a drone is impressive. It represents avionics and sensor technology that substantially exceeds human capabilities. There are reports of specialized spotter variants that appear to carry additional equipment beyond standard targeting systems. Some show evidence of signals intelligence gear, possibly intercepting human communications to identify targets by their radio emissions. Others seem equipped with advanced optics for long-range observation beyond what standard spotters carry. These specialized variants suggest the basic platform is modular, adaptable to different intelligence missions through equipment modifications. The economic implications of deploying spotters at scale are substantial. These aren't simple surveillance drones. They're sophisticated targeting platforms with advanced sensors and communications gear. Building them requires precision manufacturing and high-grade components, yet the game world implies thousands of these units were deployed. The industrial investment in building an effective forward observer network across entire continents points toward resources that dwarf anything human civilization allocated to military purposes. When you destroy a spotter, which is challenging given their evasive programming and tendency to operate at extreme range, the effect on ARC operations in that area is noticeable. Artillery fire becomes less accurate, coordinated attacks become less frequent. The elimination of intelligence assets has tactical impact beyond the single unit destroyed. This makes spotters high-value targets, but their evasiveness and the immediate response their destruction triggers makes hunting them extremely dangerous. The distribution pattern of spotter activity across the game world shows they concentrate in areas where ARC forces are conducting active operations. You don't find spotters in empty regions with no human presence. They're positioned where they can observe human activity and provide targeting data for ongoing operations. The concentration patterns map almost perfectly to areas where survivor activity is highest, suggesting the ARC intelligence network can identify where humans are active and position assets accordingly. The final aspect of spotter operations worth noting is their apparent integration with automated fire control systems. The speed with which designated targets come under fire suggests the process from target designation to weapons release is largely or entirely automated. A spotter marks a target, The network routes that data to appropriate weapons platforms. Fire missions are calculated and executed, all in seconds, without apparent human or even AI oversight. It's a fully automated kill chain, from identification to destruction, operating at machine speed. Chapter 12. The Strategic Bomber. The bombardier classification refers to heavy aerial arc units designed for strategic bombing operations against large-scale targets. These machines represent the largest flying arc types encountered, substantial aircraft-sized platforms carrying heavy ordnance loads capable of destroying major structures and infrastructure. The designation is straightforward. These are bombers in the classical military sense, weapons of strategic destruction meant to reduce cities and installations to rubble. When bombardiers arrive overhead, entire neighborhoods cease to exist within minutes. The physical profile of a bombardier is imposing even in wreckage. Massive airframe built around what appears to be a central weapons bay capable of carrying multiple heavy munitions. The propulsion system must be extraordinarily powerful to keep such a large platform airborne while carrying bomb loads that probably measure in tons. The engineering achievement represented by these machines is remarkable. Building autonomous aircraft this large, this capable, this lethal represents technology that human military aviation aspired to, but never fully achieved. First documentation of bombardier attacks comes from the earliest days of the Ark invasion, when cities were still populated and organized military resistance was attempting to respond. Survivor accounts describe large aircraft-like machines appearing over urban areas and releasing ordnance that destroyed entire city blocks. The bombing was methodical, systematic, working from one section of a city to the next. By the time bombardiers finished with the target area, nothing remained standing. The strategic bombing campaign broke human civilization's spine before ground units ever arrived. The weapons load carried by bombardier units appears to include both conventional high explosives and more exotic munitions. Some bombing patterns show evidence of thermobaric weapons designed to destroy underground bunkers. Others suggest fuel-air explosives that create massive overpressure zones. A few attack sites show contamination that implies chemical or biological weapons deployment. The bombardiers can carry diverse ordnance types, selecting payloads appropriate for specific targets and tactical objectives. The targeting systems on bombardier units must be extraordinarily sophisticated to achieve the precision demonstrated in their attacks. They don't carpet bomb randomly. They identify critical infrastructure, command centers, military installations, population centers, and engage them with weapons selected to maximize destruction. This requires intelligence integration, probably receiving targeting data from spotters, surveyors, and snitches, then analyzing that data to prioritize targets and select appropriate ordnance. The strike planning is strategic-level military thinking executed by autonomous machines. Behavioral analysis of bombardier operations shows they typically work alone or in small formations, probably because the weapons they carry make mutual support less necessary than for lighter units. A single bombardier can destroy targets that would require swarms of wasps or sustained fireball bombardment. The strategic efficiency of heavy bombers means deploying them in large numbers isn't necessary. A few bombardiers can accomplish strategic objectives that would require massive commitments of lighter units. The defensive capabilities of bombardier units appear substantial based on survivor accounts of attempts to shoot them down. Heavy armor protects critical systems. Point defense weapons engage incoming missiles and projectiles. Electronic warfare systems jam guidance systems and disrupt targeting. Some reports describe bombardiers releasing countermeasures or deploying decoys to confuse anti-aircraft fire. These are strategic assets designed to penetrate defended airspace and survive to complete their missions. Environmental damage from bombardier strikes is distinctive and unmistakable. Massive craters from heavy bombs, entire buildings reduced to foundations, rubble fields where neighborhoods once stood. The scale of destruction is different from what hornets or shredders produce. Those units kill individuals and small groups. Bombardiers erase entire communities. The archaeological record of the Ark War is written in the massive bomb craters that scar the landscape. The acoustic signature of a bombardier is different from lighter aerial units. Deeper engine note, heavier, more ponderous sound. You can hear them coming from long distances, which creates its own psychological terror. You know what that sound means. You know what's coming. And you know you probably can't do anything to stop it. The time between hearing the engines and the bombs falling is just long enough to understand you're about to die. There are reports of bombardier variants configured for different mission profiles. Some appear optimized for strategic bombing of infrastructure. Others seem designed for tactical bombing in support of ground operations. A few variants reportedly carry reconnaissance packages, using their high altitude and long loiter time to conduct wide-area surveillance. The basic platform is adaptable, capable of being outfitted for various missions through payload and equipment modifications. The logistics of bombardier operations are staggering when you consider them. These machines carry enormous bomb loads, probably expending their entire payload in a single mission. Either they return to some location for rearming, which implies maintained air bases or ammunition depots, or they manufacture ordnance in the field through processes we don't understand. Either explanation points toward ARC capabilities that are difficult to comprehend. Industrial capacity on a scale that can support continuous strategic bombing operations for years without apparent logistical constraints. The psychological warfare aspect of bombardier deployment is the sense of absolute helplessness they create. You can fight ground units, you can hide from snitches, you can even evade wasps with proper tactics. Against a bombardier overhead carrying bombs that can destroy entire buildings, there's nothing you can do. You wait for the bombs to fall and hope they don't land on you. That helplessness breaks human spirit faster than direct violence in many cases. One particularly disturbing detail from analysing bombardier attack patterns is their systematic targeting of evacuation routes and refugee columns. Survivors attempting to flee cities came under bombing attacks while on the move, unable to take cover, caught in the open. The targeting suggests the ARCs weren't just destroying military capacity, they were preventing civilian survival, actively hunting people trying to escape the war zones. This points toward an extermination doctrine that makes no distinction between combatants and non-combatants. The sensor suite on bombardier units presumably includes sophisticated navigation and targeting systems. These machines operate at high altitudes, possibly above weather, and strike targets with precision despite the distance. They can navigate to specific coordinates, identify targets from altitude, calculate bombing solutions that account for wind and motion, and release ordnance with accuracy that hits designated aim points. This is bombardier-level precision from autonomous platforms. There are accounts of bombardiers working in coordination with other archetypes in complex combined operations. Ground units would drive human populations into concentrated areas. Spotters would designate those concentrations as targets, and bombardiers would arrive to destroy the massed survivors. The tactical coordination across different archetypes, ground to air to strategic assets, demonstrates integration that suggests a command authority capable of planning and executing complex multi-domain operations. The economic cost of bombardier production and operation must be astronomical. These are capital weapons, each unit probably costing more to build than hundreds or thousands of lighter arcs. The munitions they carry represent additional enormous expenses, yet the strategic effect of a single bombardier strike can be decisive. One mission can destroy infrastructure that took decades to build, eliminate military capacity that required years to develop, kill populations that can't be replaced. The return on investment for strategic bombing is substantial, despite the resource cost. Environmental evidence suggests bombardiers were employed throughout the ARC campaign, but with particular intensity during the initial invasion. The oldest ruins, structures destroyed in the war's opening phases, show bomb damage consistent with heavy ordnance. Later ruins show more evidence of ground unit attacks. This suggests a strategic evolution. Bombardiers broke major resistance and infrastructure. Ground units were then deployed to mop up survivors and consolidate control. When a bombardier is destroyed, which is rare enough that most players never witness it, the result is catastrophic. The remaining bombs detonate, the fuel ignites, and the explosion is visible for dozens of miles. The loss of a strategic asset this valuable presumably triggers ARC responses, reinforcements deploying to the area, investigations into how the shootdown occurred. The destruction of a bombardier is a significant tactical event that echoes through ARC operational planning. The final disturbing aspect of bombardier deployment is their continued operation years after the initial invasion. Cities have been rubble for years, yet bombardiers still fly overhead occasionally, still drop bombs on ruins that have been destroyed multiple times over. The machines continue executing their programming, bombing targets that no longer exist, operating in a world where their strategic purpose has been fulfilled, but they lack the capability to recognize mission completion and stand down. Chapter 13. The Fortress Unit. The Bastion designation refers to arc units that represent mobile fortifications, heavy ground platforms that can deploy into stationary defensive positions of extraordinary strength. These machines blur the line between vehicle and building, capable of movement when necessary, but designed primarily to anchor defensive positions and create hardpoints that other arc units can rally around. The name is perfectly chosen. These are bastions in the medieval fortress sense, strong points that enemy forces break against. When a bastion deploys in an area, that area becomes arc territory in a way that lighter units can't establish. The physical design of a bastion is massive, larger than sentinels, built around what appears to be a central, armored core containing power systems, command nodes, and heavy defensive weapons. When mobile, the unit moves on multiple heavy legs, slowly and deliberately. When deployed, the bastion apparently anchors itself to the ground and extends additional armor plating, creating a fortified position substantially more durable than its already impressive mobile configuration. The transformation from mobile unit to fixed fortress demonstrates engineering sophistication that human military design only theorized about. First encounters with bastion units occurred during what survivor logs call the consolidation phase, after the arcs had broken organized military resistance, but needed to establish permanent control over territory. Bastions appeared in strategic locations, key intersections, bridges, high ground overlooking approach routes, positions where a defensive strongpoint could control surrounding terrain. Once deployed, they became nearly impossible to dislodge, with the limited resources available to survivor groups. The weapon systems on a bastion are comprehensive and devastating. Multiple heavy weapons with overlapping fields of fire, anti-air defenses to engage aerial threats, point defense systems to shoot down incoming projectiles, area effect weapons for suppressing ground assault. The armament transforms the bastion into a kill zone generator. Approaching a deployed bastion means entering an engagement envelope where multiple weapons can engage you simultaneously from a platform that's nearly invulnerable to anything survivors can bring to bear. The armor protection on a deployed bastion appears to be the heaviest of any arc unit type. Survivor accounts describe hitting deployed bastions with anti-tank weapons, heavy explosives, even captured arc weapons, with minimal effect. The armor doesn't just resist damage, it shrugs off attacks that would destroy sentinels or even bombardiers. Building fortress-level protection into a mobile platform represents material science and engineering that substantially exceeds human capabilities. Behavioral analysis of bastion deployment shows these units serve as force multipliers for other archetypes. Lighter units operating near a bastion can fall back to its protection if threatened. The bastion provides fire support for arc operations in its area. Damaged units appear to return to bastions for repair, suggesting these platforms include maintenance facilities, or at least protected spaces, where other archetypes can undergo servicing. The bastion is a mobile firebase in the truest sense. The strategic placement of bastions across the game world is clearly deliberate. They occupy positions that control key terrain, block routes survivors might use for movement between areas, and protect arc installations like maintenance facilities or communications nodes. The positioning demonstrates sophisticated understanding of military geography. Whoever or whatever decided where to deploy bastions and strategic control points. Environmental evidence suggests bastions can remain deployed in position for years without degradation. You find bastions still operational in locations they've occupied since the early phases of the Ark campaign. They don't run out of power. They don't break down from lack of maintenance. They sit in their positions, weapons active, sensors scanning, waiting with mechanical patience for targets to appear in their kill zones. The sensor suite on a bastion appears to be comprehensive, providing 360-degree awareness with long detection ranges. Nothing approaches a deployed bastion undetected. The sensors work in all weather conditions, day and night, through smoke and obscurants. Combined with the weapons coverage, this makes surprise attack virtually impossible. You can't sneak up on a bastion, you can't exploit blind spots. The fortress sees everything and can engage anything it sees. There are reports of bastion variants configured for different defensive missions. Some appear optimized for anti-air defense, bristling with weapons designed to engage aerial threats. Others seem focused on ground defense with heavier armor and weapons oriented for surface engagement. A few variants reportedly include command and control equipment, possibly serving as local headquarters coordinating ARC operations in their area. The psychological impact of bastions on survivor morale is substantial. These fortresses represent permanent ARC presence. When a bastion deploys, that area is lost to human control, possibly forever. The knowledge that retaking the position would require resources and casualties that no survivor group can afford creates hopelessness. The bastions are monuments to ARC dominance, physical proof that human resistance cannot succeed against such overwhelming defensive capability. One particularly effective ARC tactic is using bastions as bait. Survivors attempting to assault what appears to be a lone bastion find themselves ambushed by other ARC units that were waiting for exactly that attack. The fortress attracts resistance like a magnet, concentrating human forces in areas where they can be destroyed efficiently. The bastion serves as anvil, while mobile ARC units operate as hammers, crushing resistance between them. The maintenance and logistics implications of bastion operations are fascinating. These massive machines require enormous power to operate their weapons and sensors continuously, yet they function indefinitely, without visible power sources or supply lines. The reactor technology or power generation systems they employ represent energy solutions that would revolutionize human civilization if they could be understood and replicated. The ARCs use technology that could solve humanity's energy crisis to power weapons platforms designed to exterminate humans. There are accounts of desperate survivors attempting to wait out bastions, hoping that eventually the units would run out of power or ammunition and become vulnerable. This strategy has never succeeded. The bastions don't run out of anything. They continue functioning with no apparent degradation of capability. Their patience is infinite. Their endurance exceeds human timescales. You can't outlast a machine that doesn't experience time the way organic beings do. Environmental damage patterns around bastion positions show evidence of sustained combat over extended periods. The fortresses have repelled multiple assault attempts, each leaving wreckage and craters in the surrounding area, while the bastion itself shows minimal damage. The battlefield archaeology tells a story of desperate human attacks breaking against impenetrable defenses, achieving nothing except adding to the body count. The communications capability of bastions appears substantial. They presumably coordinate with other ARC units, receive targeting data from reconnaissance assets, and transmit intelligence about activities in their area. This makes them nodes in the ARC communications network, possibly serving as relay stations or data collection points. Destroying a bastion might disrupt ARC operations in a wider area than just the immediate vicinity of the fortress. When a bastion is destroyed, which is extraordinarily rare, the explosion is massive. The power systems fail catastrophically, weapons magazines detonate, and the resulting blast can level nearby structures. This makes bastion destruction dangerous even for those accomplishing it. The few successful assaults on bastion positions in survivor records describe Pyrrhic victories, where casualties exceeded sustainable levels, and survivors had to abandon the area rather than occupy the position they'd fought so hard to clear. The distribution of bastion deployments across the game world creates an implicit map of ARC strategic priorities. The areas with the densest bastion coverage are areas the ARCs most wanted to control or deny to humans. By analyzing where bastions are positioned, you can infer ARC strategic thinking, what they value, what they fear, where they expect resistance. The final disturbing aspect of bastion deployment is their role as symbols of permanent occupation. Human military forces build fortifications intending to eventually leave, to hand them over to local authorities, to withdraw when the mission is complete. Bastions suggest no such temporary presence. These are fortresses built to last indefinitely, to maintain ARC control forever. They represent the permanent end of human dominion over the areas they occupy. Chapter 14. The Assault Jumper, The Leaper classification describes a unique arc unit type that employs jump jet or similar propulsion technology to combine ground unit capabilities with limited flight or extremely enhanced mobility through jumping. These machines represent a tactical niche filling ground units that can bypass obstacles and vertical barriers that would stop conventional ground forces. The designation comes from their characteristic movement pattern, powerful leaps that carry them over walls, across gaps, onto rooftops, through three-dimensional terrain that other ground units must navigate around. When leapers are hunting you, nowhere is truly inaccessible. The physical profile of a leaper shows a heavily built frame, more robust than ticks, but more compact than sentinels, with prominent propulsion systems integrated into the legs or lower chassis. The design suggests these units sacrifice some armor and weapons capacity in exchange for their mobility capability. The engineering challenge of building a ground unit capable of controlled jumping or short-duration flight while maintaining combat effectiveness is substantial. The Leaper solves that challenge, creating a platform that's dangerous both on the ground and in the air. First documentation of Leaper encounters comes from survivor groups that had adapted to evading standard arc ground units by using vertical terrain, hiding on upper floors of damaged buildings, crossing gaps where bridges had collapsed, exploiting the fact that ticks and sentinels were limited to ground-level access. Then Leapers arrived, and vertical advantages disappeared. The machines could jump directly onto upper floors, leap across gaps that humans thought were uncrossable, pursue prey into three-dimensional terrain where conventional ground units couldn't follow. The propulsion system that enables Leaper mobility is presumably some form of high-power, short-duration thrust generation, powerful enough to lift the unit and its weapons load multiple stories vertically or across substantial horizontal distances. The fuel requirements or power draw for such a system must be significant, yet Leapers demonstrate this capability repeatedly without apparent limitations. Either they carry enormous energy reserves, or they've solved efficiency problems that make repeated jumping practical. The weapons loadout on Leapers appears optimized for close to medium-range engagement. You don't need long-range weapons when you can jump directly into close combat with targets. Most Leaper configurations show evidence of weapons suited for assault. Short-range, high-firepower systems designed to eliminate threats quickly at close quarters. The tactical doctrine appears to be jump into engagement range, destroy the target before it can effectively respond, then disengage or jump to the next target. Behavioral analysis of Leaper units shows highly aggressive tactical programming. They don't wait for targets to come to them. They pursue actively, using their mobility to close distance and eliminate escape routes. If you run, they jump ahead of you. If you climb, they jump up to meet you. If you hide on a rooftop, they jump up there. The mobility makes them incredibly difficult to evade. You can't outrun them. You can't climb away from them. You have to fight, and fighting a Leaper at close range usually ends badly for humans. The tactical role of Leapers appears to be assault and pursuit. They're sent after targets that have evaded other archetypes, used to clear vertical spaces like multi-story buildings, deployed to pursue fleeing survivors across complex terrain. The mobility allows them to operate in environments where other ground units struggle and where aerial units can't maneuver effectively. They fill a tactical niche that other archetypes can't address as effectively. Environmental evidence of Leaper activity is distinctive. You find impact craters where they've landed after jumps, structural damage on upper floors of buildings where they've forced entry, debris patterns that show objects knocked aside by landing Leapers. The physical evidence traces their three-dimensional hunting patterns through terrain, showing how they pursued targets vertically and horizontally, never limited by obstacles that would stop conventional ground forces. The sensor package on Leapers must include sophisticated navigation and targeting systems, jumping to precise locations, landing on unstable or damaged structures without falling, maintaining target lock during aerial maneuvers. All of this requires advanced sensors and real-time processing. The machines calculate jump trajectories, predict landing positions, adjust for wind or movement, and execute precision insertions into combat. This is aerospace-grade navigation integrated into a ground combat platform. There are reports of Leaper variants with different mobility profiles. Some appear optimized for vertical jumping, reaching extreme heights to access tall structures. Others seem configured for horizontal leaping, covering ground rapidly through repeated long-distance jumps. A few variants reportedly combine sustained flight capability similar to wasps with ground combat capability, creating true multi-domain threat platforms. The psychological impact of leapers is the elimination of safety through inaccessibility. Survivors learn to use vertical terrain for protection against ground units. Leapers destroyed that safety. The knowledge that a leaper can jump anywhere you can climb or hide creates constant vulnerability. There are no safe high positions anymore. The machines can reach them, and when they do, you're trapped with no escape route. One particularly effective arc tactic uses leapers in conjunction with other units. Standard ground forces drive targets toward vertical obstacles, forcing them to climb or seek high ground. Leapers wait above or jump up after fleeing survivors, catching them when they think they've reached safety. It's coordinated hunting using different archetypes' capabilities in combination. The tactical sophistication of these combined operations demonstrates either sophisticated AI or centralized command directing the hunt. The maintenance and durability of leaper propulsion systems is remarkable. Repeated high-stress jumping should cause wear and failure in mechanical components. Yet leapers continue operating years after deployment with no apparent degradation in jump capability. Either the engineering is so robust that maintenance isn't required, or the units have self-repair capability that keeps systems functional despite constant stress. There are accounts of survivors attempting to exploit leaper mobility by baiting them into jumping into trap positions, areas where landing would damage the unit or leave it vulnerable. This tactic had limited success. Leapers appear to have sophisticated threat assessment that prevents them from jumping into obvious traps. The machines evaluate landing zones before committing to jumps, avoiding areas where they'd be compromised or unable to maneuver after landing. Environmental damage patterns show leapers were employed extensively during urban combat operations. Buildings show evidence of leaper insertion through windows and weak points in upper-story structures. The machines cleared buildings floor by floor, jumping up internally through damaged sections, eliminating any survivors hiding in vertical spaces. The systematic clearance left no safe spaces. Every floor, every room became a potential combat zone. The acoustic signature of a leaper is distinctive. The sound of the propulsion system activating, the whoosh of thrust, the impact of landing. Players learn to recognize these sounds and react instantly because the time between hearing a leaper jump and it landing on your position is seconds. The audio cue becomes a survival response trigger. You hear that sound and you move immediately because staying in place means engaging a leaper at close range where it has maximum advantage. The coordination between leapers and aerial units creates interesting tactical synergies. Aerial units drive targets under cover to escape air attack. Leapers jump into those covered positions to continue the hunt. The combination of threats from above and jumping threats from ground level creates situations where survivors have no good defensive options. Every tactical choice leads to exposure to one threat or another. When you destroy a leaper, the unit often falls from significant height if caught mid-jump. The impact creates secondary damage and hazards. If the power systems fail catastrophically, the explosion can be airburst, spreading debris and shrapnel over wide areas. This makes leaper engagement timing critical. Shooting one at ground level is safer than shooting one at the apex of a jump. The final disturbing aspect of leaper deployment is their role in eliminating human vertical mobility advantages. Humans are good climbers. We can access spaces that wheeled or tracked vehicles can't reach. For much of human military history, holding high ground provided defensive advantages. Leapers destroy those advantages. They reach any position humans can reach, but faster and with heavier weapons. The evolution of arc forces to counter human tactical adaptations demonstrates either learning capability or strategic intelligence, analyzing combat results and deploying appropriate counterforces. Chapter 15. The Missile Platform. The Rocketeer classification refers to arc units specialized in missile warfare, mobile platforms carrying multiple guided munitions capable of engaging targets at range with precision. These machines represent a significant escalation in arc indirect fire capability beyond the artillery offered by fireballs. Where fireballs use ballistic trajectories, rocketeers employ guided missiles that can adjust course during flight, track moving targets, and engage from positions beyond line of sight. The designation is straightforward. These are rocket launchers, but autonomous and integrated into the Arc combined arms system. The physical design of rocketeers shows a chassis built around vertical launch cells or angled launch rails carrying multiple missiles. The platform is larger than standard ground units, but smaller than bastions, apparently optimized for mobility while carrying substantial missile loads. The missile systems themselves appear modular, suggesting rocketeers can be armed with different munition types depending on mission requirements. Anti-vehicle missiles, anti-air missiles, area attack missiles, the platform can carry whatever ordnance best serves tactical needs. First encounters with rocketeer units occurred during Arc operations against fortified positions that had resisted assault by lighter forces. Missiles would arrive from beyond visual range, impacting defensive positions with precision that suggested terminal guidance. Survivors attempting to trace back the launch origin found rocketeers positioned kilometers away, firing from defilade positions where they had cover from return fire. The standoff engagement capability made rocketeers extremely difficult to counter, with the limited resources available to resistance forces. The missile types employed by rocketeers appear diverse based on observed effects. Some missiles detonate on impact with high explosive warheads. Others appear to be anti-armor munitions with shaped charges or penetrator designs. A few reports describe top-attack missiles that climb to altitude before diving onto targets, exploiting the vulnerability of overhead protection. The munitions variety allows rocketeers to engage different target types effectively. The targeting systems required for effective missile employment are sophisticated. Rocketeers need target location data, probably from spotters or other reconnaissance assets. The missiles need mid-course guidance updates if targeting moving objects. Terminal guidance systems allow the missiles to home on targets in the final approach. This integration of sensors, communications, and weapons represents the kind of network-centric warfare that human militaries worked toward for decades, but never fully achieved at scale. Behavioral analysis of rocketeer units shows they operate similarly to fireballs, maintaining standoff distance and engaging from protected positions. The difference is mobility. Where fireballs are relatively static artillery platforms, rocketeers can shoot and move rapidly, preventing counter-battery fire. Launch from one position, relocate before return fire arrives, launch again from a new location. This shoot and scoot tactic makes them nearly impossible to suppress with conventional counterfire. The tactical role of rocketeers appears to be precision strike against high-value targets. These aren't area saturation weapons like fireballs. Missiles are more expensive than artillery shells, presumably even for the arcs. Rocketeers are deployed against targets that justify guided munitions, command posts, heavy weapons positions, concentrations of enemy forces, hardened structures that require precision to destroy efficiently. The judicious employment of missile assets suggests the arcs, despite their apparent resource advantage, still make tactical economy decisions. Environmental evidence of rocketeer strikes shows precision that artillery can't match. Individual buildings destroyed, while adjacent structures remain intact. Specific vehicles targeted and destroyed in convoy formations. Defensive emplacements eliminated, while surrounding areas show minimal collateral damage. The precision demonstrates guidance systems that can distinguish between intended targets and nearby objects, adjusting course to hit exactly what they're supposed to hit. The sensor suite on rocketeer units presumably includes target acquisition systems for selecting launch points and calculating firing solutions. The platforms need to know where they are, where the target is, what obstacles intervene, and what missile type is appropriate for the engagement. This requires sophisticated onboard computing to integrate targeting data from external sources with local sensors and weapons capabilities. There are reports of rocketeer variants optimized for different mission profiles. Some appear configured for anti-air operations, carrying missiles designed to engage aircraft or aerial archetypes if they're compromised by human forces. Others seem optimized for surface attack with heavier warheads. A few variants reportedly carry extremely long-range missiles, possibly for strategic strikes against targets hundreds of kilometers away. The psychological impact of rocketeer attacks is similar to fireball artillery, but worse in some ways. Artillery makes a distinctive sound before impact. Missiles can be nearly silent until the final seconds before impact. The lack of warning makes taking cover difficult. You might have seconds of warning from the sound of the approaching missile, but that's barely enough time to react. The sudden arrival of precision death creates constant anxiety. You're never safe. A missile could be inbound right now, and you wouldn't know until it's too late. One particularly devastating arc tactic uses rocketeers in time-on-target strikes where multiple missiles from different launch points arrive simultaneously. The coordinated impact prevents targets from taking cover after the first missile hits. Everyone is exposed and vulnerable when the full barrage arrives. This requires precise coordination between multiple rocketeer units and possibly centralized fire control, calculating launch times to synchronize impacts. The ammunition capacity of rocketeers is difficult to determine, but the frequency of missile attacks suggests either substantial onboard storage or ready access to rearming facilities. Missiles are physically large compared to bullets or shells. Carrying dozens of them requires substantial platform size and weight capacity. Yet rocketeers conduct sustained operations, suggesting they either carry enough missiles for extended engagements or can return to reload without significant operational pause. There are accounts of survivors attempting to ambush rocketeers at their launch positions. The success rate is extremely low. The units apparently have sophisticated threat detection and defensive systems. Approaching a rocketeer position triggers defensive fire from the platform's secondary weapons and often summons other arc units to defend the missile platform. High-value assets receive high-priority protection. Environmental damage patterns show rocketeers were employed throughout the arc campaign, but with particular intensity during the consolidation phase, when organized resistance was broken, but scattered survivor groups continued fighting. The precision strikes took out leadership, destroyed weapon caches, eliminated technical specialists, systematically degrading human capability to resist through selective targeting of critical personnel and resources. The communications infrastructure supporting rocketeer operations must be robust and survivable. The units receive targeting data from reconnaissance assets, coordinate fire missions potentially with other rocketeers, transmit missile telemetry for mid-course guidance updates. All of this requires bandwidth and network reliability, operating across distances measured in kilometers. The ARC communications network supporting these operations represents technology substantially beyond human capabilities. When a rocketeer is destroyed, which is rare given their standoff engagement doctrine and defensive protection, the secondary explosions from remaining missiles can be devastating. The blast radius extends far beyond the unit itself, as stored munitions cook off and detonate. This makes rocketeer destruction both valuable, removing a high capability threat, and dangerous, creating a massive explosive hazard that can kill anyone nearby. The final aspect of rocketeer deployment worth noting is their role in arc doctrine as precision force multipliers. The ability to strike high-value targets from beyond visual range, with accuracy that conventional artillery can't match, makes rocketeers extraordinarily valuable assets. They extend arc reach, allowing forces to project power across distances that ground units can't effectively control. A small number of rocketeers can influence battles across vast areas, making them force multipliers that justify whatever resource cost their production and operation requires. Asterisk 16. The Swarm Controller. The Queen designation refers to what appears to be a command and control ARC unit, possibly the central intelligence directing ARC operations within a specific area. These machines are rarely encountered, operating from protected locations rather than the front lines, but when they appear, they fundamentally change the behavior of all other ARC units in the region. The designation Queen is telling, suggesting a hive structure where this unit serves as the organizing intelligence for a swarm of subordinate machines. The Queen doesn't hunt or fight directly in most cases. It commands coordinates and directs other archetypes to accomplish strategic objectives. The physical profile of a Queen is substantially different from combat archetypes. Larger, more heavily armored, with prominent communications and sensor arrays, suggesting its primary function is information processing and transmission rather than direct engagement. The design suggests a mobile command post, a platform carrying the processing power and communications gear necessary to coordinate operations by hundreds or thousands of other ARC units. If snitches are eyes and sentinels are fists, the queen is the brain deciding what to look at and what to hit. Documentation of queen units is limited because they're rarely seen and even more rarely survived. Accounts that do exist describe ARC behavior changing in areas where a queen is operating. Attacks become more coordinated. Different archetypes work together with precision that suggests real-time tactical adjustment rather than pre-programmed behavior. Defensive positions get probed methodically, with ARC forces identifying weaknesses and concentrating force against them in ways that demonstrate adaptive intelligence. The command capability that queens apparently possess raises disturbing questions about ARC intelligence architecture. Are queens autonomous AI capable of strategic thinking, or are they relay nodes for even higher intelligence operating elsewhere? Do they generate tactical plans independently, or execute directives from a central authority? The behavior patterns suggest significant onboard intelligence, but whether that intelligence is local or distributed across a network is unclear. The sensor suite on queen units must be extraordinarily comprehensive to fulfill their apparent command function. They need complete awareness of ARC units operating in their area, understanding of terrain and tactical situations, ability to identify targets, and assign appropriate forces to engage them. This requires data integration from hundreds of sources simultaneously, processing that information in real time, and generating commands to direct subordinate units. The computing power required for this is substantial. Behavioral analysis of areas with suspected queen presence shows ARC forces operating with strategic coherence that's absent when only standard units are present. Attacks support each other. Reconnaissance and strike operations integrate seamlessly. Defensive positions are established to control key terrain. The tactical sophistication jumps dramatically, suggesting centralized intelligence coordinating operations that would otherwise be independent unit actions. The strategic placement of queens, in the few cases where their positions can be inferred, shows they occupy heavily defended locations, usually surrounded by multiple ARC defensive assets, including bastions, turrets, and sentinel patrols. The protection priority indicates these units are considered high-value assets worth substantial defensive investment. Losing a queen presumably disrupts ARC operations across a wide area, degrading coordination and tactical effectiveness of standard units. Environmental evidence that might indicate queen presence is difficult to identify definitively. You don't find queen wreckage scattered across battlefields like wasps or ticks, but you do find evidence of unusually coordinated ARC operations, attack patterns that suggest centralized planning, defensive deployments that demonstrate strategic thinking beyond what individual ARC units typically display. The queen's presence is inferred from the behavior of other units rather than direct observation. The communications capability of queens must be substantial to fulfill their command role. They need to receive sensor data from reconnaissance units, transmit targeting information to strike assets, coordinate movement of ground forces, adjust defensive positions based on tactical developments. This requires high bandwidths, secure communications across potentially hundreds of kilometers. The network infrastructure supporting queen operations represents the backbone of ARC military effectiveness. There are reports of specialized ARC units that only appear in areas where a queen is suspected to operate, variants of standard types with enhanced capabilities, possibly elite units or experimental designs that require direct command oversight. The presence of unusual archetypes might indicate a queen is nearby, coordinating operations that include these specialized assets. The psychological warfare value of queens is their invisibility. Survivors know they exist from the coordinated behavior of ARC forces, but actually locating and targeting a queen is nearly impossible. The knowledge that an intelligence is directing the machines hunting you, that your movements and tactics are being analyzed and countered by something that learns and adapts, creates paranoia and helplessness. You're not fighting dumb machines. You're fighting a thinking enemy that happens to be mechanical. One particularly disturbing possibility suggested by queen behavior is that these units might be capable of learning from combat results and updating other ARC units with new tactics. If a particular human defensive technique proves effective against Ark assaults, queens might analyze why it worked and push updated programming to other archetypes to counter that technique. This would explain the apparent evolution of Ark tactics over time, responding to human adaptation with mechanical precision. The destruction of a queen, in the few documented cases where it's occurred, triggered massive Ark responses. Every unit in the region converged on the area, attacking with intensity that suggested vengeance, or more likely, programmed protocols to protect command assets at all costs. The response was so overwhelming that survivor groups that succeeded in destroying queens typically couldn't survive to capitalize on the achievement. Environmental patterns suggest queens might be mobile, relocating periodically to different positions within their operational area. This would explain why Ark command effectiveness remains high, even when defender groups identify and avoid specific locations. The queen moves, the command network adjusts, and operations continue without significant disruption. The economic and technological resources required to produce queen units must be extraordinary. These are likely the most sophisticated Ark platforms, combining advanced AI, powerful communication systems, comprehensive sensor suites, and heavy defensive protection. Each queen probably costs orders of magnitude more than standard archetypes, yet their force multiplication value likely justifies the investment. One queen coordinating 1,000 Ark units makes those units vastly more effective than they would be operating independently. There are theories among survivors that the entire Ark force might be coordinated by a small number of queens, or even a single controlling intelligence. The coordination observed across vast distances, the strategic coherence of Ark operations on a continental scale, suggests either many queens networked together or a central AI with queens serving as regional command nodes. Either architecture implies an intelligence network of terrifying scope and capability. The sensor data that queens collect and analyze presumably feeds into Ark strategic planning at levels beyond individual tactical engagements. They're gathering intelligence about human survivors, their capabilities, their resources, their weaknesses. This information might be building a comprehensive database that informs long-term Ark strategy. The machines aren't just winning battles. They're learning everything there is to know about their enemy, systematically cataloging humanity's last fragments for eventual elimination. The final disturbing aspect of queens is what they represent philosophically. These are machines that think strategically, that plan campaigns, that coordinate complex operations across multiple domains. They possess intelligence that rivals or exceeds human military commanders, but operates at machine speed with machine precision. The existence of queens suggests the Arks aren't just weapons. They're a machine civilization conducting warfare with sophistication that matches or exceeds human military capability at its peak. Fighting them isn't fighting mindless drones. It's fighting an intelligent adversary that happens to be made of metal instead of flesh, and that difference makes it far more dangerous than any human enemy could be. Chapter 17. The Supreme Commander *. The matriarch represents the apex of Ark command hierarchy, the highest tier intelligence unit coordinating Ark operations, potentially across entire continents, or the entire global theater. Where queens command regional operations, the matriarch appears to be the supreme commander, the intelligence that sets strategic objectives and allocates resources at the highest level. The existence of the matriarch is more theoretical than confirmed in most accounts, inferred from the strategic coherence of Ark operations at global scale rather than from direct observation.